Chapter 1277. Gu Beiwe was really afraid that Qin Min would say something that would force him to reject her face to face and break her heart. But when he heard the words, "I'll divorce you," although he was relieved, he didn't know why, but his heart was a little heavy, and there was an indescribable strange feeling. Qin Min smiled at him. There was a bit of naughtiness in her usual natural and unrestrained smile, making him unable to tell whether she was joking or telling the truth. Gu Beiwe didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He didn't know whether it was because she called him Gu Beiwe, or because of her current smile. But he suddenly felt that Qin Min at this moment was the real Qin Min. Before he could answer Qin Min's question, she waved her hand. "Goodbye, Dean." After saying that, she left. This time, she really left and didn't look back. After last night, Gu Beiwe originally wanted to be cruel and coldly get rid of her feelings. But who knew that he didn't have the chance? It wasn't until Qin Min's back disappeared in the alley that Gu Beiwe couldn't help but chuckle. However, even he didn't know what he was laughing about. At night, Gu Beiwe left Ningzhou City. No one knew when he would come back. Perhaps even he himself didn't know. At the same time that Gu Beiwe left Ningzhou City, Long Feiye's carriage was also leaving Ningzhou City. Gu Beiwe went north to Medical City, while Long Feiyi and Han Yunqi went east to Chongning Saltpan. Something did happen to Chongning Saltpan, but Long Feiyi and Han Yunqi weren't so anxious. They sent the letter to Gu Beiwe on purpose. That day in the tea house, neither of them suspected anything, but that afternoon, when they thought about it carefully, both of them found some clues. Firstly, Gu Beiwe wasn't a careless person. How could he really leave Qin Min alone in Ningzhou City? He must have sent someone to secretly protect her. Miscarriage was such a serious matter. The servants would not have not reported it. Secondly, Han Yunqi recalled what she had seen in that house. There were so many medicinal forsythia flowers. It was unlikely that a normal gardener would be able to grow them. It was very likely that Qin Min had planted them herself. Thirdly, it was unreasonable for her to hide the miscarriage for 3 months. Long Feiyi and Han Yunqi both felt that there was something wrong with Qin Min's stomach. Han Yunqi wanted to get to the bottom of this. She was afraid that Gu Beiwe and Qin Min might have encountered some difficulties and kept it from her. However, Long Feiyi insisted on not interfering in Gu Beiwe's family affairs. Han Yunqi thought about it. With Gu Beiwe's character, even if they went to ask, he would at most explain a sentence or two and not say anything. Therefore, the two of them pretended that they didn't know anything and didn't visit. Gu Beiwe and Qin Min continued to put on an act and found an excuse to avoid them. The sound of horse hooves accompanied the night. Rui was already sleeping soundly in Long Feiye's arms. Long Feiyi and Han Yunqi were sleepless. They talked about the Chongning salt pans. Salt was a daily necessity. It was also a very influential thing. Its influence could even be equal to that of food. It could affect the rise and fall of a country. Han Yunqi didn't know much about salt. She only thought it was a condiment for cooking. However, she only knew how important salt was when she came to this world. Salt was used as a preservative and preservative. However, few people could be like Long Feiyi. For a fresh lobster, he spent more than 100 times the price of a lobster to get a pile of ice cubes. He even ran a few horses to death to send the fresh lobster to his residence to stew for Han Yunqi. In this world without any freezing technology, the common people could only rely on salt to preserve vegetables, meat and fish. Cloud Realm continent's eastern seafood, western and central meat, and northern dairy products could all be preserved for a period of time through salt processing. Then they could be sent to different parts of Cloud Realm continent for trade. That was how trade developed. Thus, although each household used a small amount of salt each day, the amount of salt used across Cloud Realm continent was frighteningly high. Of course, the imperial court would collect salt taxes from salt merchants. Their annual salt tax revenue was dozens of times higher than other taxes. Duke Huan of Qi, one of the 5 hegemons of the spring and autumn period, relied on Qi's salt pans to collect taxes from all the merchants in the world. Long Feiyi and Han Yunqi were heading to the Chongning salt pans, the largest in Cloud Realm continent. If something happened to them, the entire business world would be shaken. Great Qin's national treasury's income this year would be greatly reduced as well. Moreover, the salt pans involved the Aurora faction. There were thousands of workers and tens of thousands of people in charge of transportation. As long as the salt pans stopped working for a day, there would be tens of thousands of people with nothing to do and no money to earn. Logically speaking, such a large salt pans should be controlled by the imperial family. If they weren't, they should at least be related to the emperor. However, the 4 great clans of Jiangnan all owned the place. Even if the Shao clan's assets were confiscated, the other 3 clans were still there to support them. This was their biggest money bag, and something they wouldn't yield to the imperial court. Long Feiyi had long set his sights on the salt pans. Otherwise, if the 3 great clans had used them to stir up trouble, it would have been a disaster. The new tax system had just been introduced this year, so Long Feiyi didn't want to make his move so soon. Originally, he'd come to check on the progress of the tax reform, but yesterday afternoon Long Feiyi received an urgent message from Yuning about the salt pans. Someone had smuggled a huge batch of salt from the Chongning salt pans to Wintercrow country. The 3 great clans controlled the salt pans, so the imperial court couldn't monopolize them. Currently, the trade of salt within the Great Qin Empire was very free. However, if they wanted to sell salt outside of the Great Qin Empire, the imperial court would have to step in. Private transactions were not allowed, and this also involved tax evasion. To be able to obtain a large batch of salt, this matter was definitely related to the 3 great clans. As long as they could use this opportunity to suppress 1 or 2 clans, it wouldn't be difficult for Long Feiyi to take back the salt pans. 5 days later, Long Feiyi and Han Yunqi arrived at the Chongning salt pans. Ru'er was brought by Su Donglin to play, while Han Yunqi and Long Feiyi disguised themselves. Han Yunqi dressed as a man to look like a rich young master, while Long Feiyi was dressed in white, looking like a noble young master. Han Yunqi was delicate and pretty, while Long Feiyi was handsome and noble. The 2 of them stood side by side, attracting the attention of many passers-by. They wouldn't directly go to the salt pans. They used the name of the 3-way black market's East Origin Palace to send a letter of visit to the stewards of the 4 great clans in the Chongning salt pans. It was just a letter of visit from East Origin Palace. They didn't need to say anything, and anyone who understood would know their intentions. People from the black market naturally came to find the owner of the salt pans to buy salt and smuggle it. Originally, it'd be difficult for Long Fei to investigate smuggling in secret, but East Origin Hall's background made things much easier for him. Many people knew that Yuning Chamber of Commerce had power in the 3-way black market, but Long Feiyi had the most power in the 3-way black market, so not many people knew about this. In any case, the 3 great clans of Jiangnan wouldn't know. Long Feiyi used the name of East Origin Palace's young master Yi. When the stewards of the 3 great clans saw this letter of visit, they were all shocked. The Zhou clan's steward was the Zhou clan's 3rd young master, and the Morong clan's steward was Morong clan's 9th young master. The Zhou clan and Morong clan were in-laws, so they wore the same pants. 3rd young master Zhou immediately looked for Morong clan's 9th young master to discuss. Is he here to ask for goods from us? 3rd young master Zhou said very cautiously. He gave both our clans letters of visit at the same time. Could it be that he also gave it to the Xie clan? What does he want to do? Morong clan's 9th young master asked, puzzled. Lower the price. 3rd young master Zhou snorted coldly. Then what should we do? Morong clan's 9th young master had always listened to 3rd young master Zhou. 3rd young master Zhou thought for a moment and quickly said, rather than our 3 clans fighting and letting him take advantage of us, why don't we find Xie Yujun and work together to raise the price? The 3-way black market's East Origin Palace is a place with real money. If the young master comes, it will definitely be a big deal. Morong clan's 9th young master immediately agreed. Who knew that before they could find him, Xie Yujun came over and wanted to cooperate with them. The 3 of them hit it off immediately. This Xie Yujun was the eldest young master of the Xie clan. He was 5 or 6 years older than 3rd young master Zhou, and Morong clan's 9th young master. He was a famous prodigal son in the 3 great clans. However, the Xie clan's internal strife was very fierce. His mother clearly knew that he was a prodigal son, but still insisted that he be in charge of the Chongming salt pans. Although he said that he was in charge, he was actually spending a lot of money. Xie Yujun proudly said, "I've already made some inquiries. That young master Yi only brought a friend over, and is staying at Lurong Winery. I heard that he booked the entire Lurong Winery. He's really a rich master. This young master has only booked one floor. I heard my father say that the truly wealthy East Origin Palace is. Just wait and see. Once our emperor is done with his business, he will definitely clean up the three-way black market. East Origin Palace might be a target." Morong clan's ninth young master quickly said, "Io, we have to take advantage of the time when the emperor is going to search and confiscate property to get some money from him." Third young master Zhou laughed. The three of them discussed for a while and came up with a high price. Then, they each went to see young master Yi and stated the price. They still refused to budge. Long Fei Ye's move was just to test who dared to do business with the black market and smuggle salt. Who knew that the three clans would actually show up? This infuriated him quite a bit. How much money did these three fellows take away from the national treasury? Long Fei Yi didn't negotiate the price, and only said that he needed to think about it. He didn't reply to the three young masters for a whole 5 days. This made the three young masters very anxious. Finally, third young master Zhou couldn't sit still anymore. "How about we set up a banquet and invite him together and settle the price in person?" Xie Yujun agreed wholeheartedly. Morong clan's ninth young master also agreed. He said, "We can't do business without wine. I'll take care of the wine." A sly look flashed through Xie Yujun's eyes as she chuckled. "We can't do business without a woman. I'll take care of the woman. I guarantee that I'll find the best girl in Ningzhou City." Thus, when Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi arrived at the banquet, they saw a girl as beautiful as a flower sitting on the side with a pipa covering half of her face. After they sat down, Xie Yujun immediately handed over the signboard and chuckled. "Young Master Yi, let's order a song first. The girl we have today is Jiangnan's #1. Her songs he can hook one's soul. Young Master Yi, please be careful. Don't let your soul be hooked, and we can't talk about business." As soon as she finished speaking, Han Yunxi, who was sitting on the side, chuckled and said, "This person's appearance can also hook one's soul." As she spoke, she walked over and gently lifted the girl's chin with her folding fan. These people in Jiangnan really made people speechless. The older ones wanted to take in a concubine for Long Fei Yi, but the younger ones were actually here to summon girls for Long Fei Yi. Han Yunxi was angry, but the girl suddenly dodged her hand and ran toward Long Fei Yi with the pipa. Chapter 1278. That girl avoided Han Yunxi and ran over to Long Fei Yi's side. Han Yunxi's gaze immediately followed her, and she slowly narrowed her phoenix eyes. Fortunately, this girl didn't get too close. Otherwise, based on the murderous intent in Han Yunxi's eyes, today's banquet would have ended before it even started. The girl had simply changed her seat and sat at the tea table across from Long Fei Yi. Han Yunxi didn't return to the table and just leaned on the side with her arms crossed as she watched. Long Fei Yi glanced at her and couldn't help but smile. He hadn't paid attention to that girl. If Han Yunxi hadn't teased him, he wouldn't have even looked at her. The three third young masters looked at each other in dismay when they saw this. Xie Yujun inwardly thought, "From the looks of it, young Master Yi doesn't like this kind of thing. On the contrary, his friend likes this kind of thing." Third young Master Zhou thought, "Even if we can't deal with young Master Yi, it's still a good thing if we can take down young Master Han first. After all, someone who can come with young Master Yi to discuss this kind of business deal is definitely not an ordinary person." Ninth young Master Morong thought, "Young Master Han seems to like this kind of thing. Why is he so impatient?" The three of them exchanged glances and ninth young Master Morong chuckled and said, "Young Master Han, Wanwan is insensible. Please don't blame her. How about this? Let Wanwan drink 3 large cups as an apology." Before Wanwan came, she had been repeatedly told to capture young Master Yi's heart. But who knew that as soon as young Master Yi entered the door, he would capture her heart with just his face alone. Just one look at him was enough to make her lose her 3 souls and 7 spirits. She was the #1 singer in Jiangnan, The men of Jiangnan, whether they were talented scholars or the young masters of influential families, would all support her. They would spend 1,000 gold coins to beg her to sing a song, spend 10,000 gold coins to buy a night with her, and even spend their family's fortune to marry her. Unfortunately, she was too arrogant and hadn't met anyone who could move her. She owed young Master Xie a favor, so she came this time to repay the favor. Before she came, young Master Xie told her about young Master Ye's background. He also said that if she could gain young Master Ye's favor, being taken in as a concubine would also be glorious. She was shocked by young Master Ye's background, but she rejected the idea of taking a concubine on the spot. Her bottom line was to accompany him for one night. But who knew that when she saw young Master Yi, the bottom line that she had maintained for so many years was all gone. If young Master Yi had the heart, she was willing to go with him, even if she didn't have a status. When Wanwan heard Morong Jiushao's words, she knew that the situation had changed. Xie Yujun kept winking at her, but she pretended not to see it. She stood up and said seriously, "Mr. Han, please don't blame me. After Mr. Yi orders a song, this little girl will perform a song for him. I will apologize to you again." Han Yunxi nodded. "Miss Wanwan, are you trying to teach me the principle of first come, first served?" As soon as he said this, the three young masters became anxious. Xie Yujun hurriedly tried to smooth things over. "Young Master Han really knows how to joke. Come, 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 I'll compensate you with 3 cups on Wanwan's behalf. Wanwan is good at everything, but this temper of hers, it's a little fierce." "Fierce?" Han Yunxi sneered in her heart. How could a prostitute have the word fierce associated with it? She laughed. "She has taken a fancy to young Master Yi and looks down on me, right?" Hee. Long Fei Yi lowered his head and played with the wine cup. When he heard Han Yunxi's words, the curve of his lips became wider and wider. He, who usually didn't drink casually, had unknowingly started drinking that cup of wine, and found that it was quite good. Xie Yujun saw that young Master Han was overbearing and young Master Yi didn't say anything. He thought that since young Master Yi wasn't interested in Wanwan, he might as well not care about young Master Ye's face. He chuckled and said, "Wanwan, young Master Han has taken a fancy to you. Come, come, come. Let's let young Master Han order a song first." Wanwan was extremely unwilling, but when she saw the warning in Xie Yujun's eyes, she could only compromise. If she ruined Xie Yujun's plan, with Xie family's influence in Jiangnan, she wouldn't be able to stay in Jiangnan anymore. She put down the pipa and walked in front of Han Yunxi. She bowed and handed over the song list with both hands. "Thank you, young Master Han, for your kindness. Please order a song." She didn't know what Han Yunxi was thinking. She actually used her folding fan to lift Wanwan's chin. Wanwan was forced to raise her head. Han Yunxi laughed. "Which song do you like the most?" "I like all of them," Yao Yao answered, who knew that Han Yunxi actually said, "Then sing all of them once." When she said that, Wanwan's face turned pale, and the surrounding 3 men were stunned. Sing all of them once. There were more than 30 songs on the list. Every song was especially long. If she sang all of them once, she might lose her voice. After a while, Wanwan squeezed out a sentence. "Young Master Han, you really know how to joke. Do I look like I'm joking?" Han Yunxi retorted. Wanwan immediately felt wronged, and looked at Xie Yujun for help. Xie Yujun looked at Han Yunxi's serious face, and didn't know what to do for a moment. He finally regretted bringing Wanwan here. Wouldn't it be fine if they just talked about business? "Young Master Han, if we finish singing all of them, it'll take an entire day, right? You won't be able to finish listening." As third young Master Zhou spoke, he looked at Long Fei Yi and said jokingly, "Young Master Yi, your friend really likes to joke. Why don't we get down to business first, then we can enjoy the song. Tonight, I'll be the host and arrange for everyone to go on a lake tour. Wanwan can accompany you and serve young Master Han well tonight. What do you think?" He was clearly asking Long Fei Yi for help, and wanted Long Fei Yi to give him face. When Long Fei finally looked up, he was actually smiling. However, he only smiled at Han Yunxi and said, all right, stop fooling around. Come over here." Han Yunxi was quite surprised. With Long Fei Ye's personality, as long as she caused trouble, he wouldn't interfere and let her do as she pleased. At most, he would help her clean up the mess after she closed up her stall. But today, he actually told her to stop fooling around? Why was he being so kind? Could it be that he really pitied that Miss Wanwan? Han Yunqi reluctantly walked over. Unexpectedly, just as she was about to sit down next to Long Fei Yi actually pulled her over and made her sit on his lap. Han Yunqi was stunned. She didn't know what Long Fei Yi wanted to do, although he had done this before and had carried her domineeringly in front of everyone several times before. This time, she was a woman dressed as a man. Long Fei Yi pulled Han Yunqi to sit on his lap and even wrapped an arm around her waist. He chuckled and said, "All right, I won't listen to any songs. When we get back tonight, I'll listen to you sing, all right?" The three masters of the three great clans were stunned, and Miss Wanwan was even more stunned. The room was silent, and the entire world seemed to have stopped. Only the song list in Wanwan's hand slowly drifted to the ground. This young master Yi actually had homosexual fetishes. He liked men. So this overbearing young master Han was actually his gigolo. No wonder he was so fearless and dared to find fault with Wanwan. Looking at the shocked expressions of the four people in front of her, Han Yunqi finally understood what Long Fei Yi wanted to do. The young master of East Origin Palace has homosexual fetishes. This isn't a good reputation, right? She asked in a low voice. Long Fei Yi replied, "As long as you're happy." He picked up the wine cup and drank it all in one gulp, then showed the cup to Han Yunqi. "I punished myself with a cup. Are you appeased now?" Han Yunqi didn't know whether to laugh or cry, but she still maintained a proud expression. She deliberately raised her voice and said sarcastically, "Let's see how you perform tonight." Hearing this, Wanwan broke down even more. She was Jiangnan's #1 singer, talented and beautiful, but she couldn't compare to a man. She couldn't stay any longer. She glared hatefully at Xie Yujun and ran out, even abandoning her pipa. Only then did Xie Yujun and the others come back to their senses and look at each other. After they sat down, Long Fei Yi still didn't let go of Han Yunqi and let her sit on his lap. Playing around was one thing, but Long Fei Yi didn't delay his business. Although it was his first time meeting these three rich young masters, he had a rough idea of what was going on. These three young masters were definitely not the ones in charge of the Chongning salt pan. There must be someone behind them. The three family heads wouldn't hand over the Chongning salt pan to these three brainless rich young masters. He didn't want to waste time with these three insignificant people. But if he wanted to hide the real person behind them, he had to go through these three people. At first, they were just chatting, but as they talked, the anxious Morong Jiushao started to talk about the price. "Price?" Long Fei asked thoughtfully. Han Yunqi, who had been lying lazily in Long Fei Ye's arms, interrupted. "What price did you sell it to others?" Taxes were the money of the national treasury, the money of all the people in Daqin. Many places in Daqin were still waiting for the money from the national treasury to build roads and bridges, and the medical reform that Gu Beiwei and Ling had been preparing was also waiting for the money from the national treasury. The taxes that these people had missed, the taxes that they had stolen, all of it must be recovered. Not a single cent could be let go. When Han Yunqi said this, Long Fei Yi snickered in his heart. Even today, he often sighed at this woman's intelligence. He didn't know how many surprises she had yet to give him. Her words were actually very sensitive, and could easily arouse the other party's vigilance. If it was him who said this, the other party would definitely be on guard. However, as a gigolo, she casually interjected, so everything seemed very natural. Different amounts have different prices. Xie Yujun replied with a smile. Different prices for different people? Han Yunqi snorted. I thought that Mr. Ye's face was big enough to give a friendly price? Xie Yujun wanted to pull Han Yunqi out of Long Fei Ye's arms and kick her out, but he could only smile. Of course I will give Mr. Yi face. Then tell me, is Mr. Yi your biggest customer? Han Yunqi asked again. Did this big mean more face or more goods? Xie Yujun didn't know how to answer for a moment, and third young master Zhou and Morong Jiushao also didn't know what to say. In fact, the The smuggling business that they usually did was small, and they were all introduced by acquaintances. So the business was very straightforward, and there were no complicated negotiations. Before Xie Yujun could answer, Han Yunqi continued to ask, "Why don't you tell me? Who was your biggest customer before?" Chapter 1279. Xie Yujun couldn't figure out what Han Yunqi meant by the biggest. If they were talking about the biggest face, then it was definitely young Master Yi. If they were talking about the biggest order, then it was hard to say if young Master Yi hadn't asked for the goods yet. At Han Yunqi's question, Xie Yujun felt like a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. He immediately told her the largest order he'd ever handled. Long Feiyi smiled and didn't say anything. Seeing this, 3rd young Master Zhou and 9th young Master Morong couldn't sit still, and also reported the biggest order they had handled and the price. Of course, the 3 of them deliberately quoted a high price. Since young Master Yi was the young master of East Arrival Temple, he naturally didn't lack money. Han Yunqi had long silently memorized the names of the customers they reported. These 3 customers were quite famous among the merchants, but they were actually involved in smuggling. When they went back, they would definitely take care of these guys. "Young Master Yi, how much goods do you plan on buying?" Xie Yujun impatiently asked. Long Feiyi thought for a bit and stretched out his hand. 5. Xie Yujun couldn't figure it out, so he guessed higher. 50 carts? Long Feiyi coldly snorted. 500. When these words came out, Xie Yujun and the other 2 were shocked. 50 carts was already their highest estimate, but they didn't expect it to be increased by 10 times. 500 carts. As expected of the young master of East Arrival Temple, he was too generous. Xie Yujun and the other 2 were shocked and pleasantly surprised, but they also became timid. It had to be known that they couldn't make the decision for such a large order. They couldn't steal that much salt. Moreover, they couldn't handle the transportation. The transportation of salt wasn't simple. Large quantities of transportation, whether by land or water, had to be checked at different checkpoints, and a certain certificate had to be issued. The certificate clearly stated who wanted to buy, who wanted to sell, and also included proof of payment after paying taxes. If it was used to smuggle salt, it would be very difficult to transport it. Because no one was willing to take on this responsibility, the certificate couldn't be written. If it was forged, it would be easy to find out, and there would be evidence left. A small amount could be smuggled, but a large amount would require many connections. They could still find the small paths, but if it was the big paths, they wouldn't even be able to find the door. Even if Xie Yujun and the other 2 were to join forces, they wouldn't be able to swallow this single word. Seeing that they didn't speak, Long Feiyi asked, "What's wrong? You think it's too little?" No. Xie Yujun shook her head and waved her hands. "How could such a big order be too little? Do you know the price? Please name a price." "If it's suitable, I'll pay the deposit today," Long Feiyi said straightforwardly. These words made Xie Yujun and the other 2 both happy and nervous. They were happy because a big business had come knocking on their door, but nervous because if they were not careful, this business could not be done. Xie Yujun thought for a long time before finally replying, "Young Master Yi, don't worry about the price. I guarantee you'll be satisfied. It's just that the transportation aspect isn't too difficult." "What? Do you want to talk about the freight?" Han Yunqi asked immediately. Wasn't it too much of a scam to not include shipping for such a big deal? No. We're not familiar with the ways of Chong Ningdao's 3-way black market. Xie Yujun laughed. "Young Master Yi, how about this? Tomorrow, I'll invite someone who is familiar with the ways over, and we'll talk about it in detail. How about it?" When these words came out, Long Feiyi and Han Yunqi knew that they had basically achieved their goal today. "Then we'll talk about it tomorrow." Long Feiyi got up, not wanting to stay a moment longer. He finally let go of Han Yunqi, but the moment Han Yunqi stood up, he held her hand again, his big hand clasping her 5 fingers. Seeing that they were about to walk to the main street, Long Feiyi still didn't let go. "Enough," Han Yunqi said in a low voice. If they were to walk hand in hand on the main street, they would definitely attract a crowd. Long Feiyi then let go. If it wasn't for investigating the salt pond and not wanting to be too high profile, he definitely wouldn't have let go of Han Yunxi. It's still early. Where are we going? Han Yunxi was in a good mood. To the lake. Long Feiyi replied. There were many rivers and lakes in Jiangnan. Swimming in the rivers and lakes was something that everyone liked to do. Han Yunxi was very interested. Long Feiyi booked a ship and planned to stay on the ship for the night. He and Han Yunxi enjoyed the scenery of the lake, and even climbed onto a small island in the lake. Han Yunxi had fun the whole afternoon. But when night came, it was Long Feiyi's time to be happy. The two of them stood on the deck. He took out a pipa from who knows where, and handed it to Han Yunxi. When Han Yunxi saw the pipa, she understood that Long Feiyi invited her to the lake, so that she could sing a song. She didn't take the pipa, and just looked at it with a silly smile. I don't know. She knew the guqin, guzheng and flute, but she hadn't touched anything else. As for singing, she didn't know how. She could hum a few songs if he asked her to. If it was an ancient song with 1,000 twists and turns, she could hang herself to death. It's okay. Long Feiyi casually threw the pipa into the river, and didn't insist. Han Yunxi felt that something was wrong. She felt that things weren't that simple. However, Long Feiyi really didn't mention the pipa again. After a while, Han Yunxi couldn't help but say, I really don't know how to sing. It's okay. If you don't know, then don't know. Long Feiyi smiled. The less he asked, the more nervous she was. However, he talked to her about the illicit salt for the whole night, and didn't mention anything else. Han Yunxi finally let down her guard. When it was time for bed, Long Feiyi lay on his back. He didn't hug her sideways like he did in the past. Han Yunxi turned her back to him. She was very suspicious. There was something wrong with this guy tonight. She waited and waited. Long Feiyi seemed to have fallen asleep. She couldn't help it. She turned over, and saw that his eyes were wide open. You? Han Yunxi asked in surprise. Are you okay? I'm fine. Long Feiyi said lightly. You, don't be like this. I'm scared. Han Yunxi surrendered. A sly look flashed past Long Feiyi's eyes. He then said, You don't know how to play the pipa. Do you want to serve me? When he said this, Han Yunxi suddenly understood. So that was what he meant by taking her to the lake. Xie Yujun said that she wanted Wanwan to serve him for the night. So that was what he meant by lying on his back. He wanted her to serve him. I don't know. Han Yunxi said angrily. Long Feiyi finally smiled. If you don't know, I'll teach you. Thus, Long Feiyi patiently taught Han Yunxi for the entire night. He knew that she was begging for mercy, and that she was willing to serve him of her own accord. While Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi were doing it on the ship, Xie Yujun and the other two were worried all night. They couldn't come up with a solution. The salt smuggling business in the Chongning salt pans had a long history. It had existed even before Tianning was destroyed. The three great clans had secretly cooperated on this matter. They each did their own small business, while the big ones were handled by a single person in charge. That person was called Shopkeeper Chow. Only by combining the connections and power of the three great clans could they completely connect the land and water transportation routes. Otherwise, it would be impossible for a single clan to swallow up such a large business. Xie Yujun and the other two were worried about how to give this business to Shopkeeper Chow, while still benefiting from it. In the end, they agreed on a plan and went to find Shopkeeper Chow together. Shopkeeper Chow was a man around 50 years old. He was very scholarly and modest. He was recommended by the three clans, and was employed by them. He had always treated the three young masters with respect. However, he was very inflexible when handling matters, and rarely gave them an exception. Three young masters, we're honored by your presence. You must have a big business deal, right? He asked with a smile. Whether it's a big business deal or not depends on how much profit Shopkeeper Chow is willing to give us, Xie Yujun replied. The business this one accepts is a joint venture between the three clans. The profit also belongs to the three clans. Since the three of you came together, could it be? Shopkeeper Chow hesitated. This is a private business deal between the three of us, third young master Zhou muttered. Shopkeeper Chow immediately understood. According to the rules, we'll give you 10% of the introductory fee. How about it? No. This business deal isn't small. Ninth young master Morong couldn't help but speak up. Shopkeeper Chow said seriously. The three of you, it's not good to break your own family's rules. This one won't be able to explain it to your father. Do you want 500 carts of goods or not? Ninth young master Morong let it slip. 500 carts? Shopkeeper Chow was shocked. That's right. Ninth young master Morong nodded proudly. Who wants the goods? Shopkeeper Chow asked again. The illegal salt business wasn't an ordinary one. Shopkeeper Chow had always been very cautious when accepting business deals, especially large ones. You don't need to ask who it is. In any case, if you can give us 30% of the introductory fee, we'll introduce that young master to you. If it's less than 30%, there's no need to talk about it. Third young master Zhou simply said ruthlessly. This matter isn't simple. Shopkeeper Chow had a cautious expression on his face. Could it be that you've encountered a blackmailer? Shopkeeper Chow. Who do you think the three of us are? How could we be blackmailed? Ninth young master Morong sneered. 3 young masters, 500 carts of salt isn't a small amount. Where do you want to transport it to? How many checkpoints do you have to pass on the way? If something goes wrong, this matter, it'll alarm that young master in the palace. Shopkeeper Chow said seriously. All right, there's no harm in telling you. It's the young master of East Origin Hall, young Master Yi. He's friends with us, so he came looking for us. Otherwise, if East Origin Hall wanted salt, they wouldn't need to come all the way here. How many people would take the initiative to deliver it to them? Xie Yujun immediately said. This time, Shopkeeper Chow was truly intimidated. East Origin Hall. Are you going to give me the 30%? If not, I'll take it. Xie Yujun asked impatiently. Yes. Shopkeeper Chow didn't hesitate at all. If he did business with others, he would still be given credit. But if he did business with East Origin Hall, it was definitely a cash transaction, and the price was fair. If it was any other master who wanted 500 carts of salt, he would definitely be suspicious. However, if it was the rich and overbearing East Origin Hall, he believed it. The 3 young masters' connections are getting wider and wider. When did you become friends with young Master Yi? Shopkeeper Chow couldn't help but inquire. How could he not want to become friends with that kind of person? Xie Yujun and the other 2 were praised to the skies. Ninth young master Morong quickly said. We made an appointment with him to discuss the price tomorrow. If Shopkeeper Chow goes, won't you become friends with him? Shopkeeper Chow's thoughts weren't on the transaction. If the transaction was concluded, the profits would belong to the 3 clans. If he could take advantage of this opportunity to become friends with young Master Yi, then his future prospects would be broadened. He smiled and asked, Tomorrow, I'll host a banquet to invite young Master Yi. I wonder what young Master Yi likes. What do you think? When he said this, Xie Yujun and the other 2 snickered. Ninth young master Morong quickly leaned over and whispered, Young Master Yi likes men. Chapter 1280. The next day, Shopkeeper Chow invited Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi to a banquet, and Xie Yujun personally delivered the invitation. Long Fei glanced at the words Manager Chow and asked a few questions before getting the truth out of Xie Yujun's mouth. Shopkeeper Chow was the head shopkeeper recommended by the 3 great clans of Jiangnan, and he was the person in charge of the Chongning salt pans. Even the young masters of the 3 great clans had to go through him for some small transactions. Shopkeeper Chow didn't interfere with small deals, and he only dealt with large ones. Long Fei Yi was investigating large deals, and he found out that there was a large batch of salt that was going to be sent to Winter Crow Kingdom. All he needed was a big deal, and it would be enough for him to gather all the evidence and punish these people for their crimes. Even if the 3 great clans pushed all the blame onto Shopkeeper Chow, he could still use the excuse of improper management to implicate the 3 great clans and take back the salt pans. The reason why Long Fei Yi had appeared as the young master of the East Emergence Palace was because this identity was quite useful and could reduce Shopkeeper Chow's suspicions. Moreover, the route from the Chongning salt pans to Winter Crow Kingdom was the same as the route to the 3-way black market. He could find out a lot of information about Winter Crow Kingdom. That very afternoon, Long Fei and Han Yunqi arrived at the shores of Lake Tianming as promised. Manager Chow had booked a restaurant named Boat Restaurant, which cruised the waters of Lake Tianming all year round without ever docking. When shopkeeper Chow talked about large deals, he would usually book the entire ship. However, this time, not only did shopkeeper Chow book the entire ship, but he also cleared out the entire Tianming Lake and didn't allow any other ships to sail on it. Han Yunqi stood on the shore and waited for a small boat to dock. She sighed and said, "Long Fei Yi, that place is not only good for talking about business, but it's also good for talking about love." If one talked about business in the middle of the lake, the walls wouldn't be able to hear. If one kept a mistress in the middle of the lake, it would be extremely difficult to find out. Han Yunqi suddenly had the idea of doing business. She wanted to form a fleet of ships to take over all of Great Qin's lakes and set up a chain of hotels. Long Fei Yi was anxious for her to give birth to a daughter, but she always had all kinds of business experience. She wanted to be free for 1 or 2 years before having a second baby. If it weren't for Su Donglin and a bunch of shadow guard taking Rui Bao out to play, she probably wouldn't have been able to come out with Long Fei Yi and would have had to stay in the hotel with Rui Bao. She didn't know if Long Fei Yi knew what Han Yunqi was thinking. He looked back and said seriously, "Empress, if you help me take down the Chongning salt pans, I will give you a lake and a boat." Han Yunqi was just about to happily express her thanks when she suddenly understood Long Fei Yi's special intentions. Recalling the events of last night on the ship, she immediately glared fiercely at him. No. Soon, a small boat arrived to pick them up. The person who came to pick them up was actually shopkeeper Chow himself. Thanks to Long Fei Yi's prank yesterday, Han Yunqi, who was disguised as a man, had no choice but to pretend to be clingy to Long Fei Yi. After some introductions and greetings, Han Yunqi and Long Fei Yi boarded the small boat, and the small boat sailed towards the large ship. On the way, Long Fei Yi hugged Han Yunqi's waist. Shopkeeper Chow secretly glanced at Han Yunqi a few times and felt very lucky. Yesterday, after he decided to invite this young Master Yi, he immediately rushed to Jimbin Prefecture and found 2 male pets to accompany him. Of the 2 male pets, one was gentle and beautiful, and was very good at music, especially the flute. Although the other one wasn't very good looking, he had a good figure, tall and strong, and was full of masculinity. Shopkeeper Chow wanted to make friends with Sir Yi, so of course, he had to cater to Sir Yi's preferences. When they boarded the ship, Han Yunqi and Long Fei Yi saw 2 men walking towards them. From their appearance, dress, eyesight, and posture, Han Yunqi and Long Fei Yi could immediately tell that they were male pets. Han Yunqi almost laughed out loud. Long Fei Yi finally burned himself playing with fire for once. Shopkeeper Chow must have heard about yesterday's incident from Xieyujun, so he specially prepared these 2 male pets. It was one thing for him to prepare a weak little gentleman for Long Fei, but he'd even prepared one for her. Han Yunqi let go of Long Fei Yi's hand. She was very happy to see Long Fei Yi being entangled by men. However, when Long Fei Yi stared at the tall and strong male pet, his face looked like it had been frozen for 3,000 years. It was terrifyingly cold. He was about to flip out. But who knew that shopkeeper Chow would walk forward and take one of the male pets in each hand? It was very intimate and ambiguous. This, Han Yunqi was very surprised. But Long Fei Yi was also very surprised. They thought that these male pets were prepared for them. But who knew that shopkeeper Chow also had a preference for men? Moreover, his preference was very unique. He liked both types. Long Fei Yi originally wanted to throw these 2 male pets into the lake, but when he saw that they were shopkeeper Chow's men, he endured it and was too lazy to care. His complexion also improved a lot. Shopkeeper Chow didn't explain much to the 2 male pets. He smiled and led Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi to sit upstairs. Shopkeeper Chow didn't notice Long Fei Yi's unhappiness just now. His so-called catering to young Master Yi's preferences was a little better than Xieyujun and the others. He didn't directly give the male pets to young Master Yi, but pretended that he was the same kind of person. He hoped to leave a good impression on young Master Yi and make it easier to get close to him. Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi sat on one side. Shopkeeper Chow sat opposite them, The two male pets sat on the left and right sides of shopkeeper Chow. Xie Yujun and the others sat on the side. Long Fei Yi and shopkeeper Chow talked about the price quite seriously. Shopkeeper Chow was in charge of the illegal salt business of Chongming Saltworks. Naturally, he wouldn't be easy to deal with. Long Fei Yi's every word was very careful and careful. He was secretly probing. Han Yunxi was tormented by Long Fei Yi last night. She was still very tired and wanted to sleep for 3 days and 3 nights. She didn't have much energy to discuss with shopkeeper Chow, so she obediently shut up and listened and waited. Who knew that she would soon discover that the two male pets of shopkeeper Chow were actually using their eyes to seduce Long Fei Yi and her. They were constantly sending flirtatious glances. As soon as she met the eyes of the tall and powerful male pets, Han Yunxi immediately avoided them. She was so scared that she had goosebumps all over her body. However, she was secretly happy and couldn't stop laughing. She was sure that shopkeeper Chow didn't have homosexual fetishes. These two male pets were prepared for her and Long Fei Yi. She looked at Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi's attention was focused on shopkeeper Chow's identity. He didn't even notice the two male pets. Actually, with Long Fei Yi's personality, even if he wasn't focused on negotiating with shopkeeper Chow, he still wouldn't look at the two male pets. People that he didn't like, people that he didn't need, he would just ignore them like air. The more Han Yunxi looked at Long Fei Yi's serious appearance, the bigger the smile in her eyes became. She was looking forward to his reaction when he found out the truth. It would definitely be wonderful. In his life, he had been infatuated with countless women including her. But in his life, he had never been infatuated with a man like this. He had never been thrown a flirtatious glance. At this time, Long Fei Yi was discussing with shopkeeper Chow about the smuggling route. Shopkeeper Chow was quite cautious and didn't take the initiative to mention which route. Even if Long Fei Yi asked, he would just beat around the bush and talk about other things. Young Master Yi, you can rest assured about the transportation. As long as you give me a suitable deadline, I guarantee that I can deliver it to the three-way black market on time. Shopkeeper Chow seriously said, It's not the three-way black market. Long Fei Yi's words stopped here. A complicated look flashed through shopkeeper Chow's eyes. If it's not the three-way black market, where does young Master Yi plan to store it? The transportation of such a large batch of goods would be investigated. It was also very dangerous to store it. If it was discovered, it would definitely be suspected. Long Fei Yi looked at shopkeeper Chow and didn't say anything. Shopkeeper Chow was quite patient and didn't pursue the matter. However, someone on the side couldn't help but ask, Young Master Yi, could it be that you're not storing the goods and are going out directly? Many smugglers would store their goods in the three-way black market and sell them when the price was high. Young Master Yi wanted a total of 500 carts. If he wasn't storing the goods, where was he going to send them? Even if Wintercrow couldn't digest so much salt in a short time. Long Fei Yi's lips curled into a cold smile, but he still didn't say anything. Since he didn't say anything, shopkeeper Chow couldn't help but try to guess his thoughts. If it was purely storing the goods, then there was no need to buy the illegal salt. If he wanted to buy the illegal salt, then he would have to sell it outside the Great Qin Empire. Right now, Wintercrow was the only place outside the Great Qin Empire. Shopkeeper Chow had always thought that young Master Yi wanted to store the goods in the three-way black market and then sell them in batches to Wintercrow. Looking at the current situation, he couldn't figure out what young Master Yi was thinking. He probed, Young Master Yi, what you want isn't a large amount. Wintercrow definitely won't be able to handle such a large batch of goods in a year or so. Long Fei Yi raised his brows and looked over, but didn't say anything again. The more he didn't say anything, the more uncertain shopkeeper Chow felt. Based on his goal of befriending him for a long time, shopkeeper Chow hesitated for a moment, then stood up and went over to express his goodwill. He whispered into Long Fei Yi's ear, Young Master Yi, I won't hide it from you. These past few days, someone has also requested a large batch of goods for Wintercrow. If young Master Yi is also interested in Wintercrow, then this one will refuse that person. Haha, who would be so bold as to steal business from my East Origin Hall? Long Fei Yi asked in a low voice. Shopkeeper Chow didn't mention that person's name, but instead said, "Young Master Yi, if we succeed in this transaction, then this one won't give you any business with Winter Crow in the future. How about it?" Long Fei Yi only snorted coldly and didn't answer. Shopkeeper Chow knew that he was displeased, so he lowered his voice even further. "Young Master Yi, that person is Ning." Before he could say the name, Long Fei Yi inadvertently looked up and saw the male pet across from him. At this moment, the male pet was staring at him in a daze. His eyes were as gentle as water, gentle and ambiguous. In that instant, Long Fei Yi's expression darkened. He shifted his gaze and saw the other male pet continuously throwing flirtatious glances at Han Yunxi. Bang! With a heavy slap on the table, Long Fei Yi stood up. He didn't even want to ask for the smuggler's name. Shopkeeper Chow, who was halfway through his sentence, was shocked. His face was blank, and he had no idea what was going on. He hadn't even said that person's name yet. Why was young Master Yi so angry? Han Yunxi was also very surprised. She was close to Long Fei Yi, so she could hear Shopkeeper Chow's words. She had long since ignored the two male pets, and was anxiously waiting for the smuggler's name. When she heard the word Ning, she became even more nervous. Who knew that Long Fei Yi would be so impulsive at this critical juncture? Chapter 1281. Long Fei's face was filled with uncontrollable rage. Before anyone could figure out what was going on, that handsome and delicate pet of his had already rushed in front of him to comfort him. "Young Master Yi, don't be angry. If Shopkeeper Chow said anything wrong, I'll make it up to you," the male pet said as he drank the wine. He finished it in one gulp, and didn't forget to show it to Long Fei Yi. At the same time, he threw a coquettish glance at him. "Young Master Yi, this is the first cup." Soon he poured a second cup. Holding the wine cup, his fingers curled up like an orchid. When the wine cup reached his mouth, his orchid fingers covered his eyes. However, his coquettish gaze could still be seen through the gaps between his fingers. He shyly stole glances at Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi's expression was really indescribable. Han Yunxi watched from the side, and was on the verge of bursting into laughter. However, that male pet still misunderstood. He didn't realize that Long Fei Yi was angry at them. He only thought that Long Fei Yi was still angry at Shopkeeper Chow. After the second cup, he actually took Long Fei Yi's wine cup and filled it to the brim. His lips lightly touched the rim of the wine cup as he looked at Long Fei Yi and slowly drank. Long Fei Yi was about to kick him, but when he saw this, he suddenly turned his head away and retched. "Ha ha ha." Han Yunxi couldn't help but burst out laughing. She laughed so hard that she almost fell off her chair. What was the saying? "The evils we bring upon ourselves are the hardest to bear." What was the saying? I disgusted myself. This was it. If it weren't for yesterday's incident, today's farce wouldn't have happened. Shopkeeper Chow was dumbfounded. Xie Yujun and the other two were also confused. They were like two monks who couldn't figure out what was going on. That male pet was anxious. "Young Master Yi, what's wrong with you? Is your stomach uncomfortable?" He was about to approach Long Fei Yi, when Long Fei Yi finally couldn't take it anymore. He kicked out and sent that male pet flying out of the window. Splash! What a loud splash. Everyone turned to look in the direction where the male pet flew out. Long Fei Yi looked coldly at the tall male pet. He was the one who had really provoked his anger just now. How dare someone in this world seduce Han Yunxi in front of him? Long Fei Yi really wanted to pull out his whip. Who knew that when he met his murderous gaze, the male pet was so scared that he turned around and ran. He jumped out the window and directly jumped into the lake. At this point, Shopkeeper Chow finally understood what was going on. On one hand, they lamented young Master Yi's bad temper. On the other hand, they lamented that this young Master Yi was really devoted. He couldn't tolerate other people's seduction at all. Shopkeeper Chow was filled with regret. He wanted to go over and apologize, but seeing that young Master Yi was in a fit of anger, he didn't dare to move. Xie Yujun and the other two looked at each other. In the silence of the room, only Han Yunxi was still laughing out loud. Long Fei Yi looked over. His face was gloomy as he asked, "Haven't you had enough fun yet?" Han Yunxi stopped and looked at him. She couldn't help but burst out laughing. "Still laughing?" Long Fei Yi said, This time, shopkeeper Chow and the others were all nervous. They wouldn't overreach and cause young Master Yi and young Master Han to quarrel, right? If this really went on, it would be hard to tell if this business deal would go through. Han Yunxi really didn't want to laugh anymore. She covered her mouth, but the more she acted like this, the more she couldn't hold it in. Even though she covered her mouth, she was still laughing. Long Feiyi suddenly leaned closer to her and said coldly, "I'm going to ask you one last time. Are you still laughing?" Han Yunxi wasn't afraid. On the contrary, it was shopkeeper Chow and the other three's hearts that were all in the air. Han Yunxi looked up at Long Feiyi. "Young Master Yi, I don't want to laugh anymore, but it's really funny. Ha ha ha." At this moment, shopkeeper Chow and the other three's hearts almost stopped beating. However, Long Feiyi suddenly reached out and tickled Han Yunxi. He said, "Let's see if you can laugh again." Long Feiyi tickled Han Yunxi's armpit, Han Yunxi's waist, and Han Yunxi's stomach. Han Yunxi laughed as she struggled and dodged. The two of them started fooling around just like that. This sudden turn of events stunned shopkeeper Chow and the others. Not long after, Long Feiyi pressed Han Yunxi onto the table. Han Yunxi stopped laughing. She tightly pursed her lips, which were about to stiffen from laughing, and looked at him. Long Feiyi stared at her. As he stared, he suddenly couldn't help but chuckle. He asked snappily, "Still laughing?" Han Yunxi obediently shook her head. "I don't dare to anymore." But Long Fei couldn't help but laugh out loud. He kissed her gently on the lips before pulling her to her feet. Shopkeeper Chow and the others were dumbfounded by this scene. At this moment, the sound of rustling footsteps came from outside the door. It seemed that quite a number of people had arrived. Everyone looked towards the door. Xia Yujun suddenly shouted, "Oh no!" and was about to rush over to close the door. Unfortunately, before she could reach the door, a group of handsome and lean male pets all rushed over and blocked the door. There were at least 10 of them. This was what Xia Yujun had prepared for young Master Yi. Shopkeeper Chow wanted to curry favor with young Master Yi. So why wouldn't Xia Yujun want to do the same? If he could get on good terms with young Master Yi, he would have a heavy bargaining chip in the future when he fought for the position of the head of the Xia family. The male pets walked in one after another. Xia Yujun immediately went to stop them, but who knew that 2 large groups of male pets would surround them from the left and right sides of the door. In just a short while the door was completely packed. These 2 groups of men were naturally invited by 3rd young Master Zhou and 9th young Master Morong. They also wanted to get on the good side of the East Origin Palace young master. 3rd young Master Zhou and 9th young Master Morong were also anxious. They quickly followed Xia Yujun out to chase them away. Han Yunxi raised her head and glanced at Long Feiyi. Long Feiyi also happened to be looking at her. Seeing that Han Yunxi was about to laugh again, Long Feiyi immediately covered her mouth and turned his head away, not letting her see his expression. Shopkeeper Chow looked at them and finally understood one thing. If he wanted to curry favor with young Master Yi and befriend him, he must first serve this young Master Han well. This was the true definition of catering to one's interests. After Xia Yujun and the others chased away the large group of male pets, the surroundings finally quieted down. When they returned, Shopkeeper Chow was apologizing to Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi. The 3 of them also hurriedly went to apologize, but were stopped by Han Yunxi. "You're so annoying. Are we still going to talk about the matter?" Han Yunxi pretended to be impatient and said to Long Feiyi, "It's boring. If we don't want to talk about it, then let's go." "Let's talk." Shopkeeper Chow quickly walked over. "Young Master Yi, we haven't finished talking about the matter just now. Let's continue talking." Long Feiyi didn't say anything, but Shopkeeper Chow very directly said the name of the smuggler. "That person is called Ning Lu, from the Winter Crow tribe. A while ago, he lost a deposit to buy the goods, but he hasn't come back to talk about it, nor did he say when he would come again. He asked for 300 carts. Young Master Yi, I'll tell you the truth. Only 300 carts of salt can be stolen from the Chongning salt pans in the past few months. If you give it to him, you'll have to wait until next year. If you can settle the price today, I'll give you face and only do business with you. I guarantee that I can help you deliver the goods to Winter Crow tribe." Ningla, Long Feiyi was suspicious. There weren't many people with the surname Ning in the Great Qin Empire. So how could there be someone with the surname Ning in the Winter Crow tribe? He didn't ask shopkeeper Chow any further and straightforwardly stated his price. This young master will add 20% to Ning Li's price. Shopkeeper Chow had already misstated Ning Li's price. So when he heard this, he was overjoyed and immediately agreed. Long Feiyi also very straightforwardly paid a large deposit. He said, "Send 300 carts to Northern Li first. You must deliver them within 2 months." Of course. Shopkeeper Chow was very confident. Long Feiyi accepted the receipt and didn't stay any longer. He left with Han Yunqi. As soon as they returned to their residence, Han Yunqi hurriedly bowed and said respectfully and timidly, "Your Majesty, this concubine will definitely keep this concubine's mouth shut about today's matter. Please, Your Majesty, spare this concubine's life." Today's matter was probably the most embarrassing thing Long Feiyi had ever done in his life. If others found out, they might really be silenced. Seeing Han Yunqi's mischievous appearance, Long Feiyi was both amused and helpless. He raised the emperor's flag and replied loftily, "For the sake of the crown prince, we will spare your life. Haha, you can avoid the death penalty, but you can't escape punishment. Serve me in bed tonight." Long Feiyi you. Han Yunqi was about to cry. This was one of Long Fei's sure-kill moves. As soon as Long Feiyi and Han Yunqi left, Xie Yujun and the others came over to ask shopkeeper Chow for a reward. Shopkeeper Chow readily agreed. That night, shopkeeper Chow spent the entire night figuring out a fast and cost-effective route. He reported it to the true leaders of the 3 great clans early in the morning. Shopkeeper Chow was responsible for designing the route and how to deal with the various checkpoints along the way. Naturally, the 3 great clans had to work together to complete the inspection. The 3 great clans had always trusted shopkeeper Chow's ability. In addition, he was the young master of East Origin Palace. Therefore, although there was a lot of goods, it didn't arouse too much suspicion from the leaders of the 3 great clans. After asking shopkeeper Chow a few questions, they began to arrange this matter. Long Feiyi and Han Yunqi didn't stay in Long Feiyi for long. They only stayed for 2 or 3 days before leaving. On the night they returned from the negotiations, Long Feiyi sent people to investigate the person who reported the illegal salt. Not for anything else, but because the name Ning Lu had aroused a lot of speculation from him and Han Yunqi. A few days later, Su Donglin brought the informant to Long Feiyi and Han Yunqi. It was because of this informant's report that the supervisor of the Long Ning salt pans passed a report to Long Feiyi. "How did you know that someone was transporting illegal salt to Winter Crow Kingdom?" Long Feiyi asked. The informant didn't know the identities of Long Feiyi and Han Yunqi, but he was also afraid. He hurriedly answered, "Someone else asked me to do it. He gave me 500 taels and some evidence to report." "Who is this person?" Long Feiyi asked again. "I don't know." The informant thought for a moment, then said, "He covered his face, but he looked like an attendant." Long Feiyi asked 2 more questions, then let the informant leave. As soon as he left, Han Yunqi said, "Ning Lu must be a fake name. I've checked. There's no one in Winter Crow Kingdom with the surname Ning, but there's a big shot with the surname Lu. He has a strong background and specializes in slave trading. Most of them are sold to Xiankong. Slave trading is much easier to earn than illegal salt. They don't need to get involved in this. Since it's a fake name, why use Ning? Using Lu again?" Long Fei asked. Chapter 1282. When choosing a fake name, one would usually choose the most common surname and avoid arousing suspicion. However, this smuggler had chosen the surname Ning, which was not available in the Winter Crow tribe, and the surname Lu, which was used by the Winter Crow tribe's largest slave trader. Why was that? The deposit he put down is not a small sum, Han Yunqi muttered to herself. He put down the deposit, and he still doesn't want the goods? Han Yunqi suddenly realized something. Long Feiyi, Ning Lu doesn't want the goods at all. He did it on purpose. Long Feiyi also understood that Ning Lu didn't seem like a real smuggler. Instead, he seemed to have deliberately set a trap for shopkeeper Chow, and then reported it to Long Feiyi, so that Long Feiyi would pay attention to the illegal salt trade. This person can't be Ning Chung, right? Han Yunqi muttered to herself. When she heard shopkeeper Chow say the word Ning, the first person she thought of was Ning Chung. If it's him, why did he use the word Lu ? Long Feiyi actually had some guesses, but he wasn't sure. He looked at Han Yunqi and frowned deep in thought. If Ning Chung had deliberately put down the deposit to attract their attention, would Ning Chung remind them that the trafficker Lu Zheng had set his sights on the Great Qin's illegal salt trade? If it wasn't Ning Chung, then they had to find out who the smuggler was. Long Feiyi and Han Yunqi didn't dare to jump to conclusions on this matter. They could only wait for news from shopkeeper Chow. With the trap that Long Feiyi had set for shopkeeper Chow, and shopkeeper Chow's eagerness to befriend him, they believed that as soon as there was news about the smuggler, shopkeeper Chow would tell Long Feiyi. After leaving Chongning, Han Yunqi and Long Feiyi continued their journey to the south. They were visiting incognito, while waiting for shopkeeper Chow to deliver the goods. 10 days later, shopkeeper Chow sent out 100 carts of goods. Shopkeeper Chow was not careless enough to reveal the route of the goods to Long Feiyi. He only said that the first batch of goods had been sent out, and it was estimated that they would reach the vicinity of the three-way black market within a month. The weight of 100 carts of salt was not small. If it was purely transported by land, it would take at least 2 months to arrive. Long Feiyi reckoned that this batch of goods should be mainly transported by water. From the south to the north, there was only one canal that could be used, and there were many checkpoints on this canal. Such a large quantity of goods actually dares to be transported through the canal. This is too brazen. Han Yunqi was furious. This meant that the three families of Jiangnan had a lot of shady dealings in the water transport industry. Long Feiyi did not inform any of the local officials, nor did he alert the relevant high-ranking officials. He only sent people to investigate secretly. 5 days later, the second batch of goods was sent out. The time that shopkeeper Chow gave was also about a month. Without a doubt, the second batch of goods was also transported by water. 10 days later, the third batch of goods was sent out. This time, shopkeeper Chow gave them 2 months. Han Yunqi sneered. There are people in the river and on the shore. These locusts. Long Feiyi still did not make a sound. He only sent his confidants to continue the pursuit. Like this, all the civil and military officials thought that the emperor and empress had gone to Northern Li to investigate incognito. Long Feiyi and the others were secretly investigating the illicit salt in Jiangnan. A month later, the first and second batches of illicit salt arrived at a large warehouse near the three-way black market. Shopkeeper Chow sent a letter asking where Long Feiyi was sending these 2 batches of goods to Wintercrow country. Long Feiyi replied that he would send them together with the third batch of goods. A month later, the third batch of goods arrived as scheduled. 2 months of time, 2 months of tracking. Long Feiyi basically knew all the people involved in the transport of water and land, from the south to the north. He also had evidence. There were many officials who had been bribed by the 3 families of Jiangnan. There were also those who had taken the initiative to curry favor with the 3 families. There were also those who were timid and had been forced by the 3 families. The matter had been investigated to this point, but Long Feiyi was still not in a hurry. He continued to use the name of Master Yi to have shopkeeper Chow send the first batch of goods to Wintercrow Country's Shaoshan Castle. This time, shopkeeper Chow actually gave him 1 month. A month? Han Yunqi was very surprised. It would take about 2 months to travel from the three-way black market to the border between Northern Li and Wintercrow Country. The distance between the 2 places was not long, but there was no direct path to reach it. They had to go around many large mountains, and even snowy mountains. It was also a long journey from the border to Shaoshan Castle. In total, it would take less than 3 months. Long Feiyi looked at Han Yunqi and did not speak for a long time. Could it be that they have another way to get to Wintercrow Country? Han Yunqi muttered to herself. I understand. Long Feiyi suddenly understood, and a cold glint flashed across his eyes. He said, It must be Ning Chung. Good fellow. So he was hiding in Wintercrow Country to ask for wine. Han Yunqi still did not quite understand, So Long Feiyi explained to her seriously. The horses of Winter Crow country were of excellent breed, and were most suitable to be used as war horses. The Northern Dynasty's emperors had spent many years and sent many envoys across the mountains to Winter Crow country to buy horses, but they had never succeeded. But it was Junixia who brought along a few imperial princes to complete the task. The route that Junixia had taken back then was different from the usual route of the envoys. It was a secret route. Even in the cold winter, there was no need to worry about the snow blocking the way, and it could send the war horses to Northern Li in a timely manner. The two princes had died at the hands of Junixia, so the only people who knew about this secret route were Junixia's people. The people of the Black Tribe later fell into the hands of Jinzi and Ningcheng. Long Feiyi did not know whether Jinzi knew about this route. However, with Ningcheng's personality, he would definitely find out about this route. Shopkeeper Chow and the others were able to send the smuggled salt to Winter Crow country in such a short time, so they must have used this route that Junixia opened. I understand, Han Yunxi muttered. After Northern Li was destroyed, all of Northern Li was under Jinzi's jurisdiction. Jinzi had been busy with disaster relief and reconstruction, and could only relax this year. Jinzi hadn't reported anything about the secret route, while Long Fei had been so busy with Jiangnan that he'd forgotten about its existence. In other words, that secret route was not guarded at all, and there were no checkpoints. Whether it was smuggling goods or human trafficking, they could use this route. Ningcheng had used the word Lu in his fake name, which was the surname of Winter Crow's biggest human trafficker, Lu Zheng. This was undoubtedly hinting that Lu Zheng had something to do with this matter. With Lu Zheng's ability in human trafficking, it was not difficult for him to find out about this secret route between the two countries. Whether Lu Zheng wanted to use this route to smuggle salt or human trafficking, or for other purposes, with his influence at the border, he must have the ambition to control this secret route. Since the three great families of Jiangnan knew about this secret route, there was no doubt that they were in cahoots with Lu Zheng. The three great families would not be involved in human trafficking, Han Yunxi said seriously. Long Feiyi, they must be in cahoots with each other to smuggle goods. Winter Crow country is just a small place. How much business can they do? Lu Zheng was only involved in the slave trade between the mysterious continent and Winter Crow country. The three great families of Jiangnan and Lu Zheng probably have their eyes on the mysterious continent. Han Yunxi was really angry. She had wanted to trade in tobacco, alcohol, and tea from the mysterious continent. She wanted to do it legally, but Gu Beiwe had advised Long Feiyi to raise the tariffs. But these people of Jiangnan were actually smuggling and evading taxes. They had originally come to investigate the illegal salt trade, but who knew that they would find out such a big thing? Ningcheng is so considerate, Han Yunxi said seriously. Long Feiyi said coldly, beating around the bush. Haha, he better not let me find him. Long Feiyi and Han Yunxi immediately cancelled their trip to the Plum Sea and headed north with Ruer. When they passed by Medical City, they handed Rue over to Gu Beiwe, and the two of them continued north in plain clothes. After the batch of illegal salt entered Northern Li, they secretly looked for Jinzi. Jinzi was still the same, even though he held a high position and had done a lot for the people of Northern Li in the past 2 years. He hadn't changed at all. He was still very thin and didn't like loose clothes. He wore tight black clothes, short hair, and thin fringe covering the corners of his eyes. He looked cold and gloomy. If someone who didn't know his identity saw him, they would think that he was a cold and taciturn killer. In fact, his martial arts could be said to be average. What he was best at was making money, and it was easy money. While cleaning up Ningcheng's mess in Northern Li, he had secretly returned to his old business and opened an underground money house. Of course, the capital came from Mu Ling-er's gold card. He had already donated the large sum of money that Mu Ling-er had returned to him in various ways to deal with the disaster in Northern Li. The overdraft, or the part that he had scammed, was used as capital to open a small money house. Although it was a small money house, with his ability, it would become a big one in a year or two. He had been waiting for Mu Ling-er to come to him. After all, He had carefully calculated the amount. At this time, Kangon Money House should have already gone to Muling, to collect the debt. Unless Long Fei Yi, his brother-in-law, forgave Mulinger's debt and blocked the gold card. There was no reason for Muling, not to come to him. In the past few days, Jinzi took the gold card to the money house almost every day to withdraw some banknotes to see if the card was blocked. However, he was still able to take out the money every time. Therefore, he was more and more looking forward to Muling, rushing to him to quarrel. He really didn't expect that instead of Muling, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi would come to him. In fact, Manager Luo of Kangon Money House had already asked Long Fei Yi about the gold card. Long Fei Yi was too lazy to care about it, so he left it to Han Yunqi to deal with. Han Yunqi thought for a whole night. In the end, she didn't intervene. She just replied to Manager Luo, "It's official business." In the tent, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi sat in the main seat and drank tea. Jinzi stood beside them. Except for the luggage, he hadn't said a word so far. Han Yunqi thought that if she and Long Fei Yi didn't say anything, Jinzi would probably be silent for a whole day. She was really curious. Was this guy born to be quiet? Or was he quiet in front of the two of them? This guy worked for Ningcheng. Was he talkative? If he was a man of few words, why would he take a fancy to Mulinger? After all, Mulinger was a very noisy person. She often chattered away like a sparrow without stopping. Han Yunqi wanted to experiment to see how long Jinzi could stand and be silent. However, Long Fei Yi wasn't so interested. Coldly he asked, "Ningcheng is in Wintercrow country?" As soon as he said this, Jinzi immediately looked up. "Really?" Chapter 1283. Jinzi's expression surprised Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi. They had always thought that Jinzi and Ningcheng were in contact in private, and that Jinzi must have known about Ningcheng's whereabouts. But at this moment, Jinzi's agitated and resentful appearance made Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi realize that the relationship between Jinzi and Ningcheng was not as harmonious as they had imagined. Long Fei Yi was determined to drag Ningcheng out for no other reason than the fact that Ningcheng had stood him up. As long as Ningcheng fulfilled his promise, Ningcheng could go wherever he wanted and do whatever he wanted. Long Fei Yi didn't have the leisure to meddle in his affairs. And from Jinzi's reaction, it seemed that his resentment towards Ningcheng wasn't shallow. Han Yunqi immediately told him about the illegal salt trade. After Jinzi heard this, he immediately stood up and bowed with his hands clasped in front of his chest. "Your Majesty, Northernly has been decided. This humble subject wants to resign." What a good Ningcheng. Not only did he throw Northernly's mess to him, he even hid in the Wintercrow tribe to collude with human traffickers. This was what he had always wanted to do. At that time, Northernly was in turmoil, and the situation was unstable. But now even without him, Long Fei Yi could deal with the black tribe. There was no need for him to stay. Being an official was a hard job. He really couldn't do things that worried about the country and the people. He didn't even know how he had convinced himself to become an official for the people of Northern Li in the past 2 years. He also wouldn't look for Ningcheng. As long as he resigned, perhaps Ningcheng would take the initiative to look for him. Long Fei Yi originally didn't like Jinzi very much. Han Yunqi was even more wary of Jinzi. After all, this guy's background and identity were still unknown. However, in the past 2 years, Jinzi's performance in Northern Li made Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi admire and trust him. Long Fei Yi really didn't want to lose such a talent. Long Fei Yi did not stand on ceremony. Approved. Later on, when the new officials of Northern Li destroy your bank, you'd better behave yourself. Otherwise, even if you've done a meritorious deed, we will definitely deal with you. Jinzi was startled. He did not expect Long Fei Yi to know that he had opened an underground bank so quickly. However, even though he was shocked, he did not hold back. He snorted coldly and said, "There's no need to do anything. Tomorrow we'll give out the money and close the door." However, no one expected that just as Jinzi finished speaking, a very angry voice came from outside the door. "Jinzi, come out." "Surname Jin? No one here has the surname Jin." Jinzi's surname was not Jin. Jinzi's name was given because he liked gold. No one cared about the surname, because everyone was very familiar with this voice. This was Mu Ling-er's voice. Just as the voice fell, they saw Mu Ling-er storming in from outside the tent, just like a gust of wind blowing towards Jinzi. Jinzi was stunned. Countless nights, countless daydreams, countless times he had imagined this lass appearing in front of him. Just like this, just like a gust of wind blowing in front of him. But, just as Mu Ling-er was about to rush in front of Jinzi, not knowing what happened, she suddenly fell flat on her face. A loud plop sound rang out. In a moment, the entire tent quietened down. Mu Ling-er laid on the ground, not moving at all. Han Yunqi and Long Feiyi looked at her in disbelief. Jinzi was even more incredulous. Such a flat road, and this lass actually fell down. She was originally full of vigor, but with this fall, it was all gone. Long Feiyi and Han Yunqi did not make a sound. Just as Jinzi was about to help her up, Mu Ling-er looked up first, covering her mouth and nose with one hand. When she saw Jinzi approaching, her big, watery eyes immediately shot out a terrifying murderous intent, as if she wanted to cut Jinzi into pieces with her gaze. Jinzi stepped back and hid the heartache in his eyes. With a cold face he asked, "Are you okay?" Mu Ling-er got up, her hands still covering her mouth and nose. She did not even realize that her sister and brother-in-law were also in the tent. She glared at Jinzi fiercely and asked angrily, "Why did you swipe my gold card? You stole my money." Jinzi almost laughed out loud, but he held it in. He said, "Mu Ling-er, are you that rich?" "What do you mean?" Mu Ling-er asked in return. "The extra 200 million belongs to Kangon Bank. It doesn't count as your money, right?" Jinzi replied. "You." Mu Ling-er almost fainted from anger. "But that's my card. You have to put all the money you spent on my account. Why are you pretending to be stupid? If you didn't steal from me, who did you steal from?" She was already very poor after returning the money to Jinzi. Now that she had another 200 million in debt, she really wanted to bang her head against the wall and die. When she found out about this, she did not even care about Medicine City. She left Lil Thing behind and rushed straight to Northern Li. Mu Ling-er waited for Jinzi to explain. Unexpectedly, Jinzi calmly replied, "Oh, you." Mu Ling-er was so angry and anxious that she stomped her foot. She covered her mouth and nose with one hand and pointed at Jinzi with the other. You. She kept saying, "you" for a long time, but she still could not form a proper sentence. Han Yunqi and Long Fei both watched and waited. Jinzi was even more so, waiting very patiently. He thought that Mu Ling-er was going to cry. After all, she had always been a crybaby. Unexpectedly, Mu Ling-er did not cry. She said, "What do you want?" Jinzi's heart skipped a beat. He was about to answer, but for some reason, he chose to remain silent. He was still cold and arrogant as he looked at Mu Ling-er. "Give me back my card and money." Mu Ling-er walked over and stretched out her small hand in front of Jinzi. "I'll owe you first. You can charge me interest. When I earn money, I'll pay you back immediately. How about I pay you the interest every month?" It was so shameless to borrow money from a woman, but Jinzi did not mind at all and said it openly. As soon as he said this, Long Feiyi and Han Yunqi understood what was going on. They had some guesses about this matter before, but now it seemed that Jinzi wanted to borrow money to delay Mu Ling-er. Although Jinzi's bank was small, if he wanted to return Mu Ling-er the money immediately, he could do it. He would rather pay interest than continue owing her money. "I don't want to." Mu Ling-er rejected him immediately. Jinzi was very heartless. "Then I can't do anything about it. Anyway, I've already spent all the money." Mu Ling-er was so angry that her chest hurt. She stretched out her hand in front of Jinzi's eyes and immediately clenched it into a fist, ready to punch Jinzi in the face at any time. At this time, Jinzi saw that blood was gradually seeping out from between the fingers of the hand that she was covering her nose and mouth. Jinzi was very anxious. He dropped her fist and very domineeringly took away her other hand. Only then did he discover that Mu Ling-er had a lot of nosebleeds. Her nose, mouth and nose were all covered in blood. Her hands were also covered in blood. Han Yunqi immediately stood up and was about to rush over, but she was dragged away by Long Fei Yi. Jin Zi pulled Mu Ling's hand and stared at her face. A mouthful of anger suddenly surged up to his heart, making him so angry that he almost roared at her. But in the end he endured it. He did not say anything and pulled Mu Ling to the side. "Let go." Mu Ling struggled. "Be quiet for me," Jin Zi said coldly. So fierce, so fierce. He was 100 times fiercer than Mu Ling when she was asking for money. How could there be such a person? He clearly owed her money, but he was even fiercer than her. Was everyone who owed money a big boss? Mu Ling was really stunned by his fierce tone and immediately quieted down. "Raise your head," Jin Zi said coldly. Mu Ling did as she was told. She raised her head slightly and tried to stop her nose from flowing down. Ning Cheng took out his own handkerchief and also took out Mu Ling's handkerchief. After stuffing Mu Ling's nose, he went to the side and wrung out a wet towel. He sat in front of her and carefully helped her wipe off the blood stains. But Mu Ling quickly slapped his hand away. "You don't need to shed crocodile tears." Jin Zi was silent for a moment. Then he threw the wet towel to Mu Ling for her to wipe off herself. He sat at the side and watched coldly. He could not help but scold. "It's been 2 years, and you still haven't improved. The more you live, the more backward you become." Jin Zi was obviously a man of few words, but when he saw Mu Ling he could not help but want to speak. He waited for a while, but Mu Ling did not speak. He then spoke again. "Mu Ling, when will you stop making people worry about you?" Mu Ling just ignored him. She lowered her head and wiped the blood stains on her hands. After a while, she wiped it clean and stretched out her clean hand again. "Give me back my gold card." Even if he could not return the money, he should at least return her gold card, right? Jin Zi stood up and said lightly, "In a few days, I'll get someone to send it over." Mu Ling asked again, "Tell me, how much do you want to pay me every month?" "At most 5 million, plus 1 million interest every month." Jin Zi was quite serious. "Then how many years do you want to pay me?" Mu Ling was very sensitive to the dosage of medicinal herbs, but her arithmetic was still very bad. "More than 3 years, Jin Zi answered. Mu Ling did not want to bargain. She knew that with Jin Zi's shrewdness, she would not be able to win. She silently pondered in her heart. She had to plead with her sister and ask Kangon Bank to reduce the interest. She would then return the money that Jin Zi had returned to Kangon Bank every month. "Okay, give me this month's money first," Mu Ling said again. "Let's agree to exchange the money on the last day of every month. How about that?" Jin Zi asked. It was only the beginning of the month, and there was still a month until the end of the month. Mu Ling sighed. Zhenzhen was so angry that she did not want to talk anymore, so she agreed. She said, "Then return the money to Kangon Bank on the last day of every month." "Okay," Jin Zi agreed readily. Mu Ling turned to leave, but Jin Zi arrived. "You don't want the gold card anymore? I'll send someone to get it." Mu Ling deliberately turned back to look at him. "Don't worry." She finished speaking and was about to leave, but Jin Zi asked calmly, "Mu Ling, it's been 2 years. Did you break the contract?" They had agreed that she would marry Gu if he did not want her for a year. Mu Ling stopped in her tracks and did not answer for a long time. Jin Zi looked at her slender back and did not speak for a long time. The two of them were at a stalemate. Perhaps they did not know how to continue speaking, or perhaps they were waiting for each other's answer. However, Mu Ling finally opened her mouth. She said, "Jin Zi, if you want to marry someone who doesn't like you, then marry her." Chapter 1284. Facing Mu Ling's cruel reply, Jin Zi's reply was even crueler. He said, "What do you mean by like? I just need a clean woman." Mu Ling had originally calmed down, but after hearing this, her anger was immediately ignited again. He needed a clean woman? In his eyes, she was just a woman who was slightly cleaner than those dirty women? What did he take her for? Mu Ling turned around angrily and directly rushed in front of Jin Zi. She waved her fist and viciously punched Jin Zi's left eye. Jin Zi did not expect this. He never thought that this woman would really hit him. He covered his eye It was so painful that it felt as if his eyeball had been broken. Didn't women just slap the face when they hit? This stinky girl actually waved her fist. Mu Linger was mad with anger. Her fist was hit by Jin Z, and her other fist was about to hit him. Fortunately, Jin Z was prepared and pulled her in time. If you hit me blind, you'll have to serve me for the rest of your life. Jin Z said coldly. Not only will I hit you blind, I'll also hit you until you're disabled. I'm willing to marry you. I'm willing to serve you for the rest of my life. As Mu Linger spoke, she viciously aimed a kick at Jin Z's foot. Ah! Jin Z was in so much pain that he let go. He fell to the ground and hugged his foot, crying out in pain. Where did this stinky girl get her strength from? Did she use the power of the Great Desolate Era? It was so fucking painful. Mu Linger suddenly picked up a chair from the side and raised it up high, wanting to smash it down on Jin Z's head. Jin Z was stunned. Seeing his expression, Mu Linger was also stunned. Her gaze moved back and forth between Jin Z's head and the chair in her hand. Seeing this, Jin Z finally revealed a look of fear. On the other hand, Mu Linger's face became more and more furious. Mu Linger stared back and forth for a long time, before suddenly tossing the chair aside. Even she herself was startled by her own actions. Why was she so impulsive? Was she crazy? Mu Linger patted her chest to calm herself down before raising her eyebrows and looking at Jin Z with disdain. Sorry, this lady has been unclean for a long time. Think carefully about whether you want to marry her or not, and tell me later. Goodbye. Mu Linger gracefully turned around, but before she could take a step, Goldie became angry. He was truly furious. Mu Linger, stop right there. Jin Z shouted angrily. Mu Linger snorted. She was not afraid of him. She immediately took a step forward. Mu Linger, I dare you to take another step forward. Jin Z roared. This time, Mu Linger's feet stiffened, and even her heart unconsciously skipped a beat. Because Goldie's voice was really fierce. Mu Linger's first reaction was to escape, but she was unable to escape as Jin Z had already walked right in front of her. At this moment, Jin Z's eye, which was hit, was completely swollen. There was a black and blue circle around his eye, just like a panda eye. If it was any other time, Mu Linger would have laughed out loud. But at this moment, looking into his eyes, she was unable to laugh at all. She was even extremely terrified, because his pair of originally icy cold eyes were filled with monstrous fury, which was burning fiercely. Mu Linger instinctively took a step back. Actually, towards this man in front of her, she had always hidden some fear in her heart. An unexplainable fear. Jin Z looked at her coldly, allowing her to retreat. It was until she had retreated to the side of the table and had nowhere else to retreat before he walked over in large strides. You. Mu Linger's entire body tensed up as she was very nervous. You owe me money. You. Why are you still so fierce? Jin Z suddenly closed in, so close that their noses were almost touching. Mu Linger was stunned. This feeling was all too familiar. But Jin Z didn't do anything. Instead, he immediately retreated and walked to Mu Linger's side. Mu Linger's heart thumped wildly. Jin Z stood there in silence. The huge tent suddenly quieted down. After a long time, Jin Z suddenly slammed his fist on the table. He sneered. Mu Linger, whose child are you pregnant with this time? Mu Linger instinctively turned to look at him. Even that perfect side profile of his was emitting a terrifying fury. This scene was even more familiar than the previous one. Previously in Tiger's prison, he had also been so furious. He had also slammed his fist on the wall. He had said, Mu Linger, you don't even cherish yourself. How am I supposed to cherish you? At that time, she had lied that she was pregnant with Chi brother's child, and he had found out. She didn't know why, but looking at Jin Z's angry side profile, Mu Linger's heart was trembling with fear. But she couldn't help but recall scenes that she had never recalled. From three-way black market to northern Lee's Tianhe City, he had taken care of her the entire way when she had lied about being pregnant. Although he wasn't very attentive, he had fulfilled all of her requests. The soup and food that she had asked for, he had been able to find them in time. Even in the wilderness, he had been able to do it. Mu Linger didn't know why she would think of these things. She had never thought of them in the past 2 years. She had thought that she had forgotten them. As she couldn't help but recall, She looked at his angry and cold-side profile. Mu Linger's heart actually started to ache. There was an indescribable pain. But she didn't know who she was feeling this pain for. After remaining silent for a while, Jinzi turned around from the other side. He didn't look at her, nor did he say anything else. He walked out silently. Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi were still waiting outside the tent. Long Feiyi didn't care about Jinzi's private matters. He was here on official business. The moment he saw Jinzi come out, he said coldly, "If you want to resign, you can leave now. If you want to stay, go and make some preparations. Follow us to that secret passage." Jinzi, who had just been angry at Ning Cheng and shouting that he wanted to resign, actually answered Long Feiyi without hesitation. "Bring a group of people along with you and wait for them to come. The first batch of illicit salt should be arriving soon. This official will make some preparations. We will set off tomorrow morning." "Approved," Long Feiyi said. As soon as Jinzi left, Han Yunxi ran into the tent. Long Feiyi was neither gossipy nor curious. He went to the nearby ranch to observe the people. When Han Yunxi entered the tent, Mu Linger, who had been in a daze, immediately woke up and exclaimed, "Sister." Han Yunxi pretended not to know and asked, "Didn't you not like Jinzi anymore? Why are you here to play with him?" Mu Linger hadn't told her the truth from before. She only told her that she didn't like Jinzi anymore. So she didn't want to marry him. Since Mu Linger didn't say anything, Han Yunxi was happy to play dumb. It was said that even an upright official would find it difficult to resolve family matters. However, matters of the heart were more complicated and changeable than family matters. To be honest, it wasn't that people's hearts were changeable, but that people's hearts were too deep. Many times, others couldn't figure it out, and even they couldn't figure it out themselves. Mu Linger felt terrible, but she still didn't want to say anything. Firstly, she was afraid that Han Yunxi would help her pay off the debt. Secondly, her heart was in a mess, and her mind was in a mess. She really couldn't explain things clearly. She smiled and found an excuse. "I came to take a look at the snowy mountains in northern Li. Previously, Juni Xie and the Mu family worked together to plant a lot of medicinal herbs on the snowy mountains. Later on, no one cared about it. I want to go up the mountains to take a look before winter. Maybe." Originally, it was just a quick-witted excuse. However, as Mu Linger spoke, she realized that she could buy medicinal herbs from the snowy mountains. The herbs grown on the snowy mountains were worth a lot of money. "Perhaps I can make this business deal work." Mu Linger suddenly grew excited. Her previous sadness vanished like smoke into thin air. She was really such a person. Her emotions came and went quickly. She cried and laughed when she wanted to. She unexpectedly found a way to pay off her debt. Her mood suddenly became clear and bright. As long as she paid off the debt as soon as possible, she and Jinzi wouldn't have anything to do with each other. She couldn't afford to offend him, so the best way was to stay far away from him. Han Yunxi said seriously, "Those snowy mountains are not easy to climb. I heard that there are many wolf packs and snow leopards in the mountains." "Don't worry, I have a way." Besides Jinzi's big tiger, what else could Mu Linger have a way to do? Jinzi owed her so much money. No matter what, he had to help her plant medicine on the snowy mountains, right? Han Yunxi asked that question because she thought of Jinzi's big tiger. She looked at Mu Linger suspiciously and didn't say anything for a long time. Normally, she would be speechless when facing this sister of hers. "Sis, what are you doing here? Brother-in-law is here too, right? Where's Ruier?" Mu Linger asked. Han Yunxi only briefly talked about the smuggling and didn't go into the details. Mu Linger didn't understand and wasn't interested. "So you're saying that Jinzi will be going to that place with you guys tomorrow morning?" Mu Linger asked. "You want to go too?" Han Yunxi asked. Mu Linger immediately shook her head. "No, I'm just asking. How long will you guys be gone for?" Mu Linger asked again. "If it's short, it'll be half a month. If it's long, it'll be more than a month," Han Yunxi said seriously. First, they were going to find the way. Second, they were going to lie in wait. Third, they were going to investigate evidence. Long Feiyi was very patient this time and had set up a long line. It was all for the sake of catching all these smugglers in one fell swoop and taking the opportunity to take care of those big clans in Jiangnan. Then I'd better go back to Medicine City first. I'll find some medicinal seeds and bring them over, Mu Linger said seriously. That night, Jin Zi set up a bonfire banquet to eat with Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi. Because Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi were traveling incognito, Jin Zi didn't invite anyone else. After Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi arrived, they didn't see Mu Linger. Where's my family's Linger? Han Yunxi asked. Han Yunxi definitely did it on purpose. She could have gone to find Linger to come with her, but she didn't do so. I'll go invite her now. Empress, please wait a moment. Jin Zi found the attendant next to him and whispered a few words. The attendant then went to find Mu Linger. When the attendant saw Mu Linger, he said, Miss Linger, Lord Jin has set up a banquet and Empress has invited you. Lord Jin asked this one to bring you over. Mu Linger was actually hungry. Jin Zi had arranged a tent for her, but he hadn't arranged anything for her to eat. This was the camp. There was no village in front of her, and no shops behind her. Looking around, all she could see was the boundless prairie. She didn't know where to find food. She didn't know that when she and Jin Zi were super together this morning, her sister and brother-in-law were on the side. She thought that with her sister and brother-in-law present, Jin Zi wouldn't dare to be impudent. Thus, she decisively went to the banquet. Mo's public WeChat account. Jumomo 2015 welcome. Chapter 1285. The bonfire banquet was a feast unique to the northernly grasslands for celebration. Usually, firewood would be piled up in an open space, and everyone would gather around the bonfire to celebrate and eat. However, there were only 3 guests today. Jin Zi modified the traditional bonfire banquet. He didn't light a big bonfire, but made a small bonfire with an iron rack and roasted a whole lamb. Mu Linger smelled the aroma of roasted meat before she even got close. Hungry, she couldn't help but lick her lips. She was hungry. When she got closer, she saw Jin Zi personally holding the knife and sitting by the fire to serve the whole lamb. She didn't know how long he had been roasting it. The whole lamb was golden and shiny, and the meat was brown and crispy. Mu Linger couldn't help but swallow her saliva. She could give full marks for its appearance. She wondered how it would taste. Han Yunxi and Long Fei Yi sat to the side. There were 2 things on the short table, an empty plate and a pot of tea. Linger, you're here. Have a seat. Han Yunxi said with a smile. Actually, Jin Zi knew that Mu Linger had come when Han Yunxi didn't say anything. He lowered his head and carefully smeared honey on the whole lamb. Jin Zi's seat was to the right of Han Yunxi, and Mu Linger's seat wasn't there. Long Fei Yi was tasting the tea that Jin Zi had prepared. Han Yunxi looked around and pretended to be stupid. She pointed at Jin Zi's seat and said, Mu Linger, there's another seat. There was only a plate and a pot of tea in Jin Zi's seat. He hadn't sat down yet, so there were no traces of him having touched it. Mu Linger glanced at it and went over to sit. Just like that, the 3 of them sat and waited for Jin Zi to serve the meat. Although it was winter, Han Yunxi suddenly felt like she was eating barbecue by the roadside. She couldn't help but laugh as she smiled. What are you laughing at? Long Fei Yi asked in a low voice. If Jin Zi sets up a stall to sell barbecue, his business will be very good, Han Yunxi replied. No matter what, Jin Zi was the leader of the northernly grassland and a first-grade minister of Great Qin. Han Yunxi's evaluation of Jin Zi made Long Fei Yi speechless. His empress must have been crazy about doing business recently. Mu Linger didn't want to look at Jin Zi, but she was hungry. She was so hungry that her stomach was rumbling. As the aroma of the roasted meat grew stronger, her gaze drifted towards the roasted lamb. She couldn't help but glance at Gold a few times. This was the first time she knew that this guy actually knew how to roast meat, and his skills were so good. She had always thought that he was a vegetarian when she saw how skinny he was, and how he didn't have much meat on him. With his level of roasting skills, God knows how many cows and sheep he had eaten in the northernly grasslands. Mu Linger thought that Jin Zi must be the kind of person who could eat meat every day without getting fat. It really made people envious and jealous. Indeed, Jin Zi was a person who liked to eat meat. The only thing that attracted him in the northerly grasslands was the meat on the grasslands. Not long after, Jinzi finished roasting the lamb. The whole lamb was golden and shiny, looking crispy and yellow, making people want to take a bite. Soon, everyone found that Jinzi was not only good at roasting, but also very good at cutting. His martial arts were obviously not good, but when he waved the knife, he had a special style. His movements were like moving clouds and flowing water. The knife light flashed, and there was a bit of knife chi. Han Yunqi and Long Feiyi watched with interest. Han Yunqi muttered, "This guy really has some skills. Maybe he has good talent for practicing martial arts." Long Feiyi said, but Han Yunqi only laughed. He must have trained his hands so quickly in the gambling dens. Jinzi was the #1 gambling king in the three-way black market. Winning or losing on the gambling table depended on one word: fast hands and fast eyes. Mu Linger watched in a daze, forgetting that she was hungry. At this moment, Han Yunqi suddenly became alert. "There's poison." She immediately looked behind Mu Linger and saw a big red-eyed white tiger coming out of nowhere, approaching Mu Linger step by step. This big tiger's physique was bigger than the average tiger by a size. Its teeth and claws were poisonous, and it was undoubtedly the poisonous tiger that Juni Xia had kept in Tiger's prison. The poisonous tigers in Tiger's prison were later subdued by Jinzi, and many of them sacrificed themselves to help Jinzi in his rebellion. The one in front of them should be one of the two that survived. As the saying goes, tigers are full of might. When a tiger walks, it will be awe-inspiring and imposing. But this red-eyed big tiger was interesting. It was obviously a huge creature, but when it walked it was like a mouse. It lowered its head and tiptoed stealthily toward Mu Linger in fear of being discovered. Han Yunqi and Long Feiyi didn't say anything when they saw that this big guy didn't have any ill intentions toward Linger. Mu Linger's attention was completely focused on the roasted lamb head slices in Jinzi's hands, and didn't notice the strange situation behind her. Jinzi sliced up a large plate of roasted lamb. Each piece of meat was long and uniform in thickness. The slices of roasted lamb were stacked together in the center of the large plate. He glanced at Mu Linger from the corner of his eye, and immediately knew that Dabai was here. However, he didn't make a sound, and only strode toward Han Yunqi and the others. Your Majesty, this is the best food on the grasslands. Please accept it." Jinzi offered the plate with both hands respectfully, but not humbly. There was still a hint of arrogance in his eyes. "Thank you," Long Feiyi said indifferently. Long Feiyi didn't have a big appetite, but he ate very well, and had very high standards for food. Needless to say, Jinzi's plate of roasted meat was still to his liking. After putting down the roasted meat, Jinzi ordered someone to bring over a plate of lettuce. This lettuce was also carefully selected. Each leaf was of moderate size, and was a light green in color. In a large lettuce, there were probably only 1 or 2 leaves. A plate of appetizing roasted meat, and a plate of tender lettuce that made one want to bite into it. Just the sight of it was a pleasure. However, Jinzi also brought over a plate of sauce. This was secretly made by this lowly official. As Jinzi explained, he took out 2 pieces of lettuce and wrapped them around a piece of roasted lamb. Then he stuck the sauce on it and presented it to Han Yunqi. Logically speaking, he should have presented the dish to Long Feiyi first. After all, the emperor reigned supreme. However, Long Feiyi wouldn't haggle over seniority with Han Yunqi. Naturally, he wouldn't bicker with Jinzi either. Han Yunqi had seen this way of eating before. However, Long Feiyi had never seen it before. He was very curious and interested. Han Yunqi took a bite and immediately revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. "It's super delicious." This roasted lamb not only looked good, but the meat inside the crispy skin was also very soft and tender. Most importantly, it didn't have a bit of sheep smell. Instead, the fragrance of the meat was mixed with the fresh and refreshing taste of the lettuce. It was very palatable and unique. Han Yunqi wasn't surprised by this way of eating. However, this was the first time that Han Yunqi had tasted this taste and texture. Han Yunqi hurriedly helped Long Feiyi wrap it up and let him try it. After Long Feiyi tasted it, he also said it was good. To be able to get Long Feiyi's nod of affirmation, Jinzi was very proud. He explained in detail how to pay attention to the roasted meat, the choice of lettuce, and the preparation of the sauce. Mu Ling sat at the side and watched. As she listened, her stomach started to growl. This was simply torture. Not only did he make her wait for so long when he invited her over for a meal, he actually deliberately dragged it out. Based on her understanding of Jin Z, with Jin Z's character, how could he explain so much nonsense? He was obviously deliberately using the excuse of explaining to waste time and not bring the meat to her. Mu Ling was still very ambitious. She didn't leave in a fit of pique and let Jin Z laugh at her. She also didn't take the initiative to ask for it. She just sat there and simply turned her head away. Just when Mu Ling was sulking, a tiger roar suddenly came from behind her. Oh, Mu Ling jumped up in fright. She almost lost her soul. She turned back to take a look and actually realized that a big tiger was sitting behind her. She was given a fright again. The next time she retreated, she didn't know how she fell down. This time round, Jin Z finally looked over at her. Not only Jin Z, Han Yunxi, Long Fei Yi and the big tiger were all looking at her. Mu Ling wanted to stand up, but she was so hungry that she really didn't have the strength. One must know that she hadn't even eaten lunch. From noon till now, she had only drunk a few cups of water. Although she was weak and wanted to cry, but she still clenched her teeth and stood up. She naturally recognized that big white tiger. Back then it was this big white tiger that had brought her, Jin Z and little Tang Tang to hide in the cave. It was also this big white tiger that had found a female tiger to feed little Tang Tang. Why was it roaring at her? Just as Mu Ling was about to roar back at that big white tiger suddenly roared at Jin Z. In actual fact, that big white tiger's roar wasn't directed at Mu Ling, but at Jin Z. Jin Z was stunned. This beast actually dared to roar at him? What was it roaring at? Jin Z looked at that big white tiger and didn't make a sound. However, that big white tiger roared at him again. From that look, anyone could tell that it was extremely dissatisfied with Jin Z. Seeing this, Mu Ling was bewildered. What was going on? Suddenly, that big white tiger jumped out from that position and pounced towards the side of the bonfire. It picked up that whole roasted lamb from the rack and brought it in front of Mu Ling. Give it to her. This. Mu Ling was first stunned before she burst out laughing. Jin Z, to think that you're the leader of the tiger army. That big white tiger actually betrayed us. Looking at Jin Z's stunned expression, Mu Ling felt especially relieved. She pulled the whole roasted lamb over and tore off a leg and started to chew on it. This way of eating compared to Jin Z's exquisite way of eating was simply much simpler and cruder. Roasted well delicious. Mu Ling wasn't stingy with her praises. As she spoke, she tore off a leg and rewarded it to that big white tiger who was sitting by the side. That big white tiger happily took a bite and ate with relish, completely ignoring Jin Z's extremely gloomy face. Looking at the human and tiger's table manners, even Long Fei Yi couldn't help laughing. Han Yunxi couldn't help but burst out laughing, but who knew that as she laughed, she suddenly stopped and leaned on the table. What's wrong? Long Fei Yi asked in shock. Han Yunxi didn't reply as she leaned on the table and didn't move as she stroked her chest. Long Fei Yi was anxious, and just as he was about to help her up, Han Yunxi couldn't help but vomited. Long Fei Yi had never encountered such a situation before and was at a loss. When Mu Ling saw this, she immediately rushed over. Elder sister, what's wrong? Chapter 1286. Long Fei Yi didn't know what to do. Mu Ling quickly rushed to Han Yunxi's other side to support her. Han Yunxi couldn't stop retching. She was disgusted, but she couldn't spit it out. Jin Z, find a doctor. Long Fei Yi anxiously shouted. Jin Z was also stunned. He didn't expect to find such a thing. The food he gave was absolutely carefully selected. There was no problem. What are you doing? Find a doctor. Long Fei Yi's gaze was enough to kill. Jin Z didn't dare to delay, and immediately went. Mu Ling anxiously asked, Sis, what's wrong with you? How about I help you vomit? It could be seen that she was either choking on the food or was disgusted but couldn't spit it out. This kind of neither up nor down state was the most uncomfortable. The best and fastest way was to vomit. Vomit everything out. Once it was unblocked and smooth, she would feel better. Han Yunxi was so disgusted that she couldn't answer Mu Ling, or she just kept waving her hand, indicating that she didn't need it. Just like this, Long Fei Yi and Mu Ling watched Han Yunxi suffer but couldn't help. Only when one was sick would they know how fortunate it was to have a doctor by their side. At this moment, the three of them must have thought of Gu Beiyue. After a while, Jin Zi dragged an old doctor over. Han Yunxi stopped vomiting. Her face was a bit pale as she leaned on the table. Her entire body didn't have much strength. Long Fei Yi and Mu Ling surrounded her, asking about her condition. When they saw the doctor come over, the two consciously moved aside. The old doctor didn't come over immediately. Instead, he tidied his hair and beard while complaining to Jin Zi. I already told you, don't look for old man if it's a small illness or pain. The old man is busy these days. Yuning City's big benefactor is a patient. Don't talk nonsense. Quickly go take a look. Jin Zi said coldly. Big benefactor? The old doctor didn't think that it would be the emperor and empress. He only thought that some important officials had come. He also looked over. Just by looking at Han Yunxi's expression, he knew that the patient was her. What are you talking about? Why aren't you coming over? Long Fei Yi bellowed. This old doctor was one of Ning Cheng's men. He was Ning Cheng's personal doctor in the army. He had followed Ning Cheng ever since Ning Cheng was Tianning's great general. His medical skills were excellent, but his temper wasn't very good. He only treated serious illnesses, not minor ailments, and never gave face to influential officials. He glanced at Long Fei Yi and went to check Han Yunxi's pulse without saying anything. After a while he let go of her hand, stroked his beard, and asked slowly, What did you eat just now? Barbecue. Mu Ling quickly replied. Have you eaten anything else today? The doctor asked again. Long Fei Yi quickly told him what they had eaten in the morning and afternoon. The old doctor nodded as he listened, even stroking his flowery beard. Long Fei Yi had finished talking for a long time, but he still didn't speak. Just what's going on? Mu Ling asked impatiently. Unexpectedly the old man said. Judging from the pulse, there's nothing serious. It must be that the barbecue is too greasy and causing discomfort. That's it. Mu Ling said seriously. My big sis didn't eat much, and this barbecue isn't greasy at all. I'm most afraid of greasy food, so I'm fine even after eating a lot. Jin Zi glanced at her, but didn't say anything. If it's not greasy, then it must be because she ate too quickly, the old doctor said. Mu Ling knitted her brows and was about to retort when Long Fei Yi finally spoke up. That's it. The old doctor didn't answer immediately, but continued stroking his beard as he stood up. Then what else does everyone want? It's just vomiting. And there's nothing serious. There's no need to make a fuss about such a small matter. If you're still worried, take care of her tonight. Tomorrow, the old man will find a doctor to come and take a look. A sneer flashed across Jin Zi's mouth, but she didn't say anything. Long Fei Yi was about to get angry, but the old man actually said, You young people who live like princes are greedy for life and afraid of death. How can you be so scared over such a small matter? If you see those real patients, won't you be scared to death? As he spoke, he turned to look at Jin Zi. Lord Jin, the old man will tell you one last time. No matter who is sick, even if the most powerful person in Yuning City is sick, if it's not serious, don't trouble the old man. The old man has a bunch of patients waiting for him. Jin Zi didn't say anything, and Long Fei Yi narrowed his eyes. Han Yunxi was stunned, and Mu Ling wanted to refute. But this hateful old man's words were very reasonable, and she didn't know how to refute. The old doctor ignored them and turned to leave. At this moment, Han Yunxi felt disgusted and couldn't help retching. Long Fei Yi was anxious and angry, and he quickly went to drag the old doctor over. However, the old doctor turned around and added, If it wasn't for the greasy diet, I'm afraid she's just pregnant and her pulse hasn't appeared yet. Madam, don't eat too much greasy food and rest early. After the old doctor finished speaking, he still looked arrogant and turned to leave. However, Long Fei Yi was stunned. He looked at Han Yunqi in shock. And he didn't care about the old doctor's rudeness. Han Yunqi looked up at him. And she was also surprised. Just pregnant? In other words, she just got pregnant? Ah! Suddenly Mu Ling screamed. Sister, you're pregnant. With Mu Ling's shout, Long Fei Yi and Han Yunqi came back to their senses. Han Yunqi couldn't help but laugh. Long Fei Yi was so surprised that he didn't know what to do. He already had a son, but when he heard that Han Yunqi might be pregnant, he still felt the same as when he was about to be a father for the first time. Surprised, excited, surprised, and at a loss. He couldn't help but smile. It was faint, and he wasn't laughing out loud, but anyone could tell that he was very, very happy. He squatted down in front of Han Yunqi, took her hand and whispered, Tell me. Han Yunqi was a little confused, and she didn't understand what he meant. This time, tell me personally, Long Fei Yi said again. The last time she was pregnant with Ru'er was already a few months old. Only then did he know that he was going to be a father. This time he couldn't miss it. He wanted her to tell him personally, Han Yunqi understood. She was happy, touched, and worried at the same time. But it's not confirmed yet. I can't read his pulse, she said. Long Fei Yi thought for a moment, and said seriously, Then I'll wait. He got up and immediately summoned the shadow guard. Send a letter to Medical City, and ask Gu Beiwa to come over as soon as possible. Han Yunqi didn't know what to say to him. She really didn't look forward to her second child. She wanted to take it slow. After all, Ru'er was still young, and she still had a lot to do. But seeing Long Fei Yi like this, she suddenly looked forward to it. She really hoped that she was pregnant, and that she could look at him, and share the good news with him personally. Long Fei Yi didn't let Han Yunqi stay outside. He immediately brought Han Yunqi back to the tent to rest. Mu Ling followed and volunteered to take care of all 3 meals and supper. Long Fei Yi's original plan was completely disrupted. He sent a few subordinates to find the secret passage with Jin Zi, and wait for him. At the same time, he secretly handed over all the evidence in his hands to the Supreme Court official, letting him take charge of the case. Before Jin Zi set off, he specially went to the kitchen to take a look at Mu Ling. Unfortunately, Mu Ling was focused on cooking porridge, and didn't know that he had come. Jin Zi left silently. It would take at least a month for him to return. He wasn't worried that Mu Ling would leave. Firstly, as long as the Empress didn't leave, this girl wouldn't leave. Secondly, he hadn't given her his gold card yet. Half a month later, the prairies had officially entered winter. The north wind was very strong, and whistled all day long. Gu Beiwa arrived at the military camp alone. He had a gray fox fur coat over his snow-white robes, and was carrying a medical case on his right shoulder. He stood at the entrance of the tent. Even though he was covered in dust, it couldn't hide the extraordinary handsomeness between his brows. No matter how restless the north wind was behind him, it couldn't blow away the gentleness and calmness in his eyes. He gave a faint smile. Empress, please forgive this subordinate for being late. How could there be such a person? Even in the cold winter, as long as she saw him, the entire world would warm up. Han Yunqi smiled, not knowing how to answer him. Long Fei Yi also gave a helpless smile. Gu Beiwa, your qigong has improved again. Long Fei Yi had estimated that Gu Beiwa would arrive in 5 days. But who knew that he would arrive 5 days early? Emperor, it's good that Empress doesn't blame me. Gu Beiwa smiled and quickly came over. Empress, this subordinate will take your pulse. Han Yunqi quickly reached out her hand. Gu Beiwa was serious and professional. Long Fei Yi stood to the side and waited. The large tent quieted down. In reality, in this half a month, Han Yunqi had more or less made her own judgment. Her good friend didn't come, so there was an 80 to 90% chance that she was pregnant. However, the pulse didn't appear, so she didn't dare to be completely sure. Long Fei Yi didn't understand that much, and she didn't explain too much to him. She just waited for Gu Beiwa to arrive. A long time passed, but Gu Beiwa still didn't seem to have found anything. Long Fei Yi was already nervous, but he didn't dare to speak. Han Yunqi wasn't that nervous at first, but when she saw Long Fei Yi's serious expression, she also became nervous. Finally, Gu Beiwa let go of Han Yunqi's hand, The moment he let go, Long Feiyi asked, "How is it?" Gu Beiwa smiled but didn't say anything. He stood up. "How is it?" Long Feiyi asked again. That anxious look was really unlike him. Gu Beiwa stood up and bowed respectfully. "Congratulations, Your Majesty. Empress is indeed pregnant." Long Feiyi was overjoyed. He looked at Han Yunxi, and was about to speak when Han Yunxi covered his mouth and said, "Long Feiyi, I'm pregnant." They had agreed that she would tell him this personally. "Long Feiyi, I'm pregnant." She was the only one in the world who could say this. So of course she had to say it. "Long Feiyi, I'm pregnant." Han Yunxi repeated. Long Feiyi was so happy that he couldn't speak. Gu Beiwa smiled silently at the side. That joy came from the bottom of his heart. Suddenly there was a loud bang. Everyone turned around, and saw Mu Linger standing at the door. The porridge in her hand had been smashed to the ground. Before anyone knew what had happened to her, she ran towards Han Yunxi and shouted in surprise, "Sis, you're really pregnant. That's great. I want to go back with you. I want to take care of you." Chapter 1287. Mu Linger was very persistent. No matter how Han Yunxi tried to persuade her, she insisted that they return to Yuning to learn cooking from Granny Zhao and take care of Han Yunxi. She actually forgot all about her debts and the fact that she had to plant medicinal herbs in the snowy mountains. Han Yunxi had no choice but to ask shopkeeper Luo to press for Mu Linger's debts in private. She also disabled the gold card and made it useless. Only then did Mu Linger give up and obediently stay in the barracks to wait for Jin Zi to come back and deal with the debt. Before leaving, Han Yunxi left Mu Linger with a sentence. She said, "Linger, you're not young anymore. You should live for yourself." Han Yunxi left him with these words before leaving. Mu Linger stood in a daze for a long time in the howling north wind. When she was young, she lived for her father's orders and for the glory of the Mu family. In those years, she chased after Qi brother everywhere. She had been busy with all kinds of matters in Medicine City. If any of her friends were in trouble, she would be the first to help. Live for herself? She had never thought about this question. Now that Han Yunxi had explained it to her, she didn't really understand. However, she didn't know why, but she felt as if a certain part of her heart was being pulled. It didn't hurt, but it was uncomfortable and blocked. She stood there for a long time before returning to the barracks. Just as she was about to enter, she suddenly heard someone call her from behind. "Mu Linger." She turned around and saw Jin Zi riding on a horse. His face was covered in dust, and his clothes and hair were messed up by the strong wind. The sky was dark, and the north wind was rampant. The entire grassland was dark and gloomy. Jin Zi's black clothes almost merged with the dark sky. Mu Linger felt like she was dreaming. It was a dream about the edge of the world and the end of time. It must be a dream. Jin Zi was far away at the western border. How could he be here? She hadn't dreamed of anyone for a long time. Her dreams were always empty. Why did this annoying fellow barge in? She clearly wanted to dream of her big brother Shaoqi. Not only did he disturb her in real life, he even dared to intrude into her dreams like a haunting ghost. He was really very annoying. Mu Linger ignored him and turned around. As soon as they entered the tent, the whole world suddenly became bright and warm. Mu Linger also became much more awake. She thought that she must have been hallucinating. But who knew that just as she sat down, Jin Zi walked in. Mu Linger was stunned. Only then did she completely sober up. She blurted out, Why are you back?" He should have just arrived at the border. Jin Zi came back halfway, because he suddenly realized that if Han Yunxi was really pregnant, he would not stay in Long Feiyi for long. The winter in Northern Li was not easy. With Mu Linger's personality, she would definitely follow him back. Therefore, he gave the map to Su Donglin and returned. "You are still not leaving?" Jin Zi asked in return. Mu Linger did not understand for a moment. Jin Zi added, "Your sister has already left. Why are you still here?" Mu Linger was originally feeling a little down, but after Jin Zi asked this question her anger surged. She said coldly, "You haven't returned my gold card? How am I going to leave? Do you think I'm willing to stay here? Let me tell you, Qianquan Bank has already come to collect the debt from me. Do as you see fit. Someone will return the gold card to you in a few days. Someone will also arrange for the debt to be paid at the end of the month. I will also help you pay the interest from Kangon Bank. As Jinzi said this, he purposely opened the door and opened it. You can leave now. Mu Linger felt stifled. She did not know what to say. She wanted to leave immediately, but she thought for a long time before she remembered about the snow mountain. Yes, she still had to go up the snow mountain to plant herbs. Her sister did not want her to take care of her, so of course she had to quickly plant the herbs. She could either buy them from the black market or use them as collateral for Kangon Bank. If not for this, even if her sister did not want her to take care of her, she would have left long ago and returned to Medicine City. Mu Linger explained herself in her heart. She felt a little more confident and asked in return, You, why did you come back? I forgot to take something, Jinzi said coldly. Oh, Mu Linger answered loudly. Then, the two of them fell silent again. Jinzi hardened his heart and asked again, You're still not leaving? He really did not expect her to stay. He wanted to ask her why, like a madman. But if he asked, it would sound like he was chasing her away. You're still not leaving? Aye. Mu Linger hesitated. Jinzi unconsciously furrowed his brows, waiting for her answer. Unfortunately, Mu Linger did not give him an answer but a goodbye. She said, Who said I'm not leaving? I just forgot to take something. I'm leaving now. Goodbye. Of course, she would leave the army camp, but she would not leave Northernly. She left after saying that, striding past Jinzi and out the door. Jinzi was stunned. He stood there motionless. The tent was brightly lit, and the stove was warm, but his body was gradually becoming colder. He had rushed back day and night, riding a horse at full speed. He allowed the wind to pour into his clothes and into his body. It was so cold that he lost all feeling in his body. But that was not as cold as the coldness he felt at this moment. After a long time, he turned his head and saw the vast grassland outside the door. It was gloomy and bleak, without any light or end in sight. He began to think about Mu Linger's question. Why did he come back? To keep her? But he clearly did not. A year had already passed. What did he want to do by forcing her to come here? He clearly knew that she hated him. He clearly knew that he would not force her to marry him. If he wanted to, he would have done so a year ago. Now that he had forced her to come here, what could he do? Jinzi took out the gold card and looked at it silently. Actually, he had always carried this gold card with him. He could return it to her at any time. He looked at it for a long time before handing the gold card to the servant. He said calmly, Go to the bank and pay off all the money in this card. Yes. The servant asked, Master, then this card you don't want it anymore? Jinzi stared at the servant and did not answer for a long time. The servant felt his hair stand on end. He did not know whether to say or not. He was so scared that his legs turned to jelly. In the end, Jinzi did not say whether he wanted the card or not. He just turned and left. The servant looked at the gold card in his hand with a confused expression. Lord Jin's thoughts were the most difficult to guess. What should he do? Jinzi rushed to the border that day and did not ask about Mu Linger's whereabouts. A few days later, the servant went to the underground bank and transferred a sum of money to Heaven and Earth Bank. Heaven and Earth Bank lifted the ban on the gold card. The servant brought it back, but didn't know what to do with it. After struggling for 3 days and 3 nights, he finally secretly put the gold card under Lord Jin's pillow. Half a month later, Han Yunxi and Long Feiyi returned to Yuning Palace. Gu Beiwa also brought Ru'er back from Medical City. Han Yunxi began her happy days of nurturing her baby. However, Ru'er had no choice but to sleep in separate beds from them. After all, Ru'er slept in a different bed. It would be a big problem if he kicked his mother's belly. At first, Ru'er wasn't happy and made a fuss for 2 nights. Later on, Ru'er stopped making a fuss. Every night, when the Grand Tutor wanted to leave the palace, he would follow and stay in the Grand Tutor's residence at night. Gu Beiwa did not return to Medical City, so the matter at Medical City was delayed. Mu Linger did not return to Medicine City, so the matter at Medicine City was also delayed. The matters at Medical City and Medicine City were not urgent. After all, Long Feiyi had to fill the national treasury first before he could touch Medical City and Medicine City. Mu Linger did not return to Medicine City. Since Lil Thing had nothing to do, it ran back to Yuning City. Once it came back, Ruier would have company and would not return to the palace with Grand Tutor Gu. He forced his imperial father and imperial mother to come to the Grand Tutor's residence to accompany him several times. Ruier was actually just throwing a tantrum. As long as his imperial father and imperial mother came, he would be overjoyed and would definitely return to the palace with them that night. He also did not want his imperial mother to sleep with him. Instead, he relied on his imperial father. In the end, Long Feiyi had no choice but to put 2 beds in the palace. Because of Ruier and Lil Thing, the originally quiet Grand Tutor's residence became lively. The livelier it was, the more Han Yunqi missed Qin Min. She was also more curious about what had happened between Qin Min and Gu Beiyue. She and Long Feiyi only knew that Qin Min was most likely faking her pregnancy. However, they really could not guess the truth between Qin Min and Gu Beiyue. Han Yunqi wanted to ask him about Qin Min multiple times, but she held back the words as they reached her lips. After all, Gu Beiyue's attitude in Ningzhou City made it difficult for her to ask too many questions. After all, that was Gu Beiyue's family matter. A month later, Jin Zi, Su Donglin, and the people sent by the Supreme Court found out about the illegal salt. They arrested the people who were escorting the salt at the secret passage between Northern Li and Winter Crow. At the same time, they found some evidence of the 3 great clans colluding with Winter Crow's human trafficker Le Zheng. The 3 great clans had indeed colluded with Le Zheng to occupy the secret passage and smuggle other goods to the mysterious continent. However, they had not acted on it yet. Long Feiyi did not personally appear in the trial, nor did he expose East Origin Palace. He let the Supreme Court Chancellor preside over the case. After a month of trial, the Chancellor convicted shopkeeper Chow and many people from the 3 great clans. At the same time, he also arrested a large number of officials. Because the 3 great clans' patriarchs were not directly involved in the case, they were not convicted and could only be considered as being implicated. However, Long Feiyi used this case to eliminate many of the 3 great clans' influence in the Great Qin's officialdom. At the same time, he took back the Chongning salt pans and took the opportunity to take over the other salt pans. It could be said that this case completely reversed the situation in Jiangnan. From then on, there were no more wealthy clans in Jiangnan that could rival a nation. It was also from this year that the Great Qin's treasury became more and more abundant. It was worth mentioning that the Supreme Court Chancellor did not know where the evidence given to him by the emperor came from. A few vice-chancellors personally interrogated shopkeeper Chow to find out who he was transporting the salt to. In the end, shopkeeper Chow did not reveal the young lord of East Origin Palace. He knew that the death penalty was unavoidable. Before he died, he still hoped that the young lord of East Origin Palace would treat his family and clansmen well. As for the 3 young masters, they did not dare to confess. Because once they did, the 3 great clans would be punished even more severely. The buyer of the salt became the final mystery. Long Feiyi and Han Yunqi would probably never reveal the truth in this lifetime. Because of this, only Han Yunqi knew that the young lord of East Origin Palace had a homosexual fetish. After the case was over, Jin Zi was exhausted. He returned to the army camp and fell asleep on his pillow. Tomorrow Linger's story would be opened. Chapter 1288. Jin Zi returned to his tent from the border and fell asleep as soon as he hit the bed. The smuggling case had nothing to do with him at all. He didn't know what had gone wrong with his head, but he'd risked his life to help Su Donglin and the justice courts capture the culprit. Unfortunately, he hadn't gotten any information on Ningcheng this time. He wanted nothing more than to rush to Le Zheng's lair and arrest him for interrogation. Unfortunately, violence wasn't his strong suit. He'd urged Su Donglin to capture the culprit multiple times, but Su Donglin didn't dare to act rashly despite his intentions. Le Zheng was from Winter Crow country, so it was legal to sell slaves there and on the mysterious continent. Thus, Great Qin couldn't convict him of any crime. As for Lu Zheng's collusion with the three great clans of Jiangnan, there was evidence, but Wintercrow country refused to hand over the culprit. Great Qin's laws couldn't punish them either. The imperial court could only ban Lu Zheng and the others from entering the Great Qin Empire. Once they stepped into the Great Qin Empire, they would be killed without mercy. Actually, Long Fei didn't care about Wintercrow country at all. He once considered using this as an excuse to send troops to Wintercrow country and annex it. But in the end, Han Yunxi stopped him from doing so. For one thing, sending troops to Wintercrow country would only leave them with rumors of the strong bullying the weak. For another, Lu Zheng's background was complicated. His businesses had many connections with the mysterious continent, so it wouldn't be worth it if conflict broke out between Cloud Realm and the mysterious continent because of this. Chu Shifeng was left behind at Wintercrow country to investigate Jin Zi's origins and Ning Cheng's whereabouts. His colleagues were also investigating Lu Zheng's business dealings with the mysterious continent, as well as his own family's power. Jin Zi only wanted Ning Cheng's whereabouts, so he could only wait. Jin Zi laid on the pillow and slept for 1 day and 2 nights. God knows how tired he was. On the morning of the 3rd day, he raised his head in a daze. His short hair was messy like a bird's nest, and his bangs were all sticking up. His pair of cold eyes were completely exposed. It had to be said that his eyes were really beautiful, especially when he looked sleepy and confused at this time. He didn't have the usual coldness, but had the cuteness of a big brother next door. He reached out to rub his messy hair, and lay back on the pillow lazily. He had been busy for so long, and now that he woke up after a good night's sleep, he suddenly didn't need to be busy anymore. He was a little unused to it. He stared blankly at the empty tent. No one knew what he was thinking, but his eyes suddenly became sluggish, as if he had lost his soul. After a long time, he finally came back to his senses. He rubbed his hair with all his might, messing it up completely. He got up. His movement was not small, and the pillow was thrown to the ground. He was about to lie down to pick it up, when he caught a glimpse of a gold card lying quietly on the bed. It's him. Her gold card. All of Cloud Realm Continent's gold cards had the same front, but the back was different. The gold card in front of him was facing up, but he recognized it at first glance. After all, he had hidden it in his robes for a year. He picked it up and flipped it to the back, only to see that it was right. He looked and thought. Suddenly, he threw the gold card out, and it hit the pillar in the middle of the tent. He got off the bed, tidied himself up, and left the house. He didn't know where he went, but after a busy day, it was already the middle of the night by the time he returned. The tent was so big, but the gold card was so small. Still, he saw it as soon as he entered the tent. "Someone come," he said coldly. A servant immediately entered. "Your Excellency Jean, what orders do you have? Have you paid off all the debts this Excellency owes?" Jin Zi asked icily. "All paid off," the servant replied honestly. "And the interest?" Jin Zi asked next. "All paid off as well," the servant replied. Jin Zi stared at the card on the pillar and asked again. "And the card? Did you return it too?" The servant didn't see the card hit the pillar, but he was alarmed. So his master wanted to return the card to Miss Langer. "Your servant put the card under Your Excellency Jin's pillow. Your servant will go get it right away," the servant said anxiously. Jin Zi said expressionlessly. The servant hurried to the bed, but couldn't find the card, even after searching under the pillow for a while. He picked up the pillow, only to see that it was empty. "What?" The servant was frightened. When Your Excellency Jin wasn't here, he'd come every day to clean the tent and make the bed once every 2 or 3 days. Yesterday, when he came to change out the blankets, he even took a look and saw that the card was still lying under the pillow. How come today? Frightened, the servant began to search all over the bed, but he couldn't find a trace of the card, even after lifting the covers. "Your Excellency Jean, did you?" he wanted to ask, but swallowed the words back in the end. If Your Excellency Jean saw the card again, he would have returned it long ago. Why would he ask so many questions? He thought that Your Excellency Jean must have asked, because he didn't see it. "Your Excellency Jean, your servant really put the card under the pillow, but now..." The servant was so anxious that he was about to cry. But now it's gone. Gone. Jean Z looked at him coldly. Please spare my life, Your Excellency Jean. Your servant definitely didn't embezzle the card. Even if I had a huge order, I wouldn't dare to do so. Please understand, Your Excellency Jean. The servant knelt down and begged. Jean Z was still expressionless as he said coldly, If it's gone, then so be it. Go and tell Mu Ling, to go to Kangon Bank, and get her banned from using the card. This matter ends here. The servant was very surprised. He didn't expect that Your Excellency Jean didn't blame him for such a huge matter. Yes. Just as the servant was about to run out, Jean Z added, You better find Mu Ling, as soon as possible and ban that card. Otherwise, if it's misused, all the debts will be on your head. The servant was so frightened that his heart almost jumped out of his chest. He turned around and ran, immediately using all the resources at his disposal to find Mu Ling. That night, 4 letters were sent by Eagle, 1 to Medical City, Medicine City, Yuning City and Pilfine Pharmacy. After the servant left, Jean Z glanced up at the gold card hanging from the pillar and went to sleep. Several days later, the servant still hadn't received any news from Mu Ling. He knelt by the pillar with tears and snot running down his face, begging Jean Z for advice. Your Excellency Jean, you will definitely find Miss Ling. Please have mercy, Your Excellency Jean. Your Excellency Jean, Miss Ling isn't in Medical City, Medicine City, or Yining City. She's not in Pilfine Pharmacy either. Your Excellency Jean, please give this humble one some directions. Jean Z murmured. She hasn't returned to Medicine City. The servant shook his head. This humble one has asked the Mu clan twice. They all said that Miss Ling hasn't returned since she went north last time. Jean Z suddenly frowned. The servant hurriedly continued. Medical City asked Vice Academy Head Shen, and Yuning City asked Grand Tutor Gu. They all said that they haven't seen her. Before Jean Z could say anything, the servant hurriedly added, This humble one will go ask the people in Medicine Ghost Valley. However, 2 days later, the steward of Medicine Ghost Valley replied, saying that Mu Ling hadn't been to Medicine Ghost Valley for more than 2 years. That night, Jean Z couldn't sleep. The next day, he received a handwritten letter from Han Yunxi, questioning him about Mu Ling's whereabouts. Han Yunxi had always thought that Mu Ling was staying in the northernly barracks, waiting for Jean Z to return, so that they could plant medicine in the snowy mountains together. After reading the letter, Jean Z came to a realization and immediately rushed out of the tent. At this time, the sky was dark and gloomy, and the entire grassland was covered in heavy snow. Jean Z looked into the distance, but he couldn't see the snowy mountains in the distance. Jean Z angrily kicked a stone at his feet and angrily said, Mu Ling, how stupid can you be? The snowy mountains in the northern part of Northern Li were continuous, each taller and steeper than the last. Many of them had yet to be climbed, so they were revered as sacred mountains by the local herdsmen. In the northern part of Northern Li, there were many activities to worship the mountain gods and snow gods every winter. Only a few of these snowy mountains were suitable for growing medicinal herbs, while many of them hid many precious wild medicinal herbs that had yet to be excavated. In the past, Juni Xia had developed 3 snowy mountains to grow medicinal herbs, all of which were in the northwestern part of Northern Li, bordering Winter Crow. The mountains weren't steep, but they were very high. The mountainside was covered in snow all year round, so it wasn't easy to climb up or down the mountain. According to Jean Z's understanding, the medicinal herbs that Juni Xia and the Mu clan had jointly planted were very rare and very special. They could only survive in the snow. In other words, those medicinal herbs were distributed on the mountainside of the snowy mountains. It was soon going to be the coldest time in Northern Li. In a few days there would be several days of heavy snow. When that time came, not to mention going up and down the snowy mountains, even going out would be difficult. Although those 3 snowy mountains had been opened up by Juni Xia, it was still very dangerous for Mu Ling to go alone. Not to mention that the mountain roads were difficult to traverse. Just the wolves and snow leopards on the mountain were impossible to guard against. Those ferocious beasts couldn't find any prey in the cold weather. So once they saw a person, they would all pounce over to fight for food. It would be strange if Mu Ling didn't get torn apart. The more Jinzi thought about it, the uglier his face became. He suddenly blew a sharp whistle to summon the big white tiger. But who would have thought that the big white tiger, that would usually rush over when he gave the order, actually didn't appear? Jinzi blew again, but the big white tiger still didn't appear. He was shocked and personally ran to the tiger camp near his tent. He saw that the tent that he had specially prepared for the big white tiger was empty, with nothing inside. "Where's the tiger?" he coldly questioned. "I haven't seen it for several days. It should be in the mountains," the guard timidly replied. Big White was the leader of the tiger troops. The tiger troops were all hidden in the nearby hills, and only Big White lived in the military camp. Usually, Big White would run into the mountains and forests, so it was normal for it to not return for an entire month. Apart from Lord Jean, no one else in the army dared to approach Big White, nor did they dare to care about its whereabouts. They were only responsible for delivering roasted meat to Big White every day. Faced with the angry and anxious Lord Jean, the guard was very confused. A complicated look flashed across Jinzi's eyes. Coldly he said, "I'll be away for a while, so I'll leave the military matters to the deputy generals." After giving his instructions, Jinzi went into the mountains. After asking around, he found out that Big White wasn't in the forest. That day, he brought 10 white tigers and went straight to the snowy mountain herb fields. Chapter 1289. Mu Ling was indeed in the snowy mountain medicine fields. The 3 snowy mountains in the western part of northern Li were connected together. All 3 of them ran north and south in a straight line, forming a wall between northern Li and Wintercrow country. The entire mountain range was called the Jiaxin Mountain Range. From south to north, each mountain was taller than the last. Junixia and the Mu clan had worked together to open up large patches of ice and snow medicine fields on the mountainsides of the 3 snowy mountains. But only the first snowy mountain had been planted for a season, while the other 2 were still abandoned. Originally, after Han Yunxi and Medicine Ghost Valley had joined forces to monopolize all the medicine sold in Medicine City, Junixia and Cloud Realm Trade Consortium had planned to develop the medicine fields on the snowy mountains. But that plan had ended before it could even begin. Mu Ling had been staying on the mountainside for half a month now, accompanied by the still missing Big White. Big White had been following her ever since she left the army camp. She was planning to return to Medicine City and wait until summer to explore the snowy mountains again. However, seeing that Dabai was following her around, she became restless. After preparing for 3 days, she brought Big White to the snowy mountains. She had already learned from the Mu clan that the Mu clan and Junixia were working together to develop the medicine fields on the snowy mountains. Their main goal was to grow snow jade cordyceps. Snow jade cordyceps was an extremely precious medicinal ingredient that was almost extinct among all the other cordyceps. As one of the best wild nourishing medicinal ingredients, snow jade cordyceps were crazily sought after by countless nobles. Unfortunately, the number of such ingredients had dwindled over the past 10 years. It was already considered a lot to harvest 10 cordyceps each year. The rarity of snow jade cordyceps had something to do with its formation. That's right, this type of medicinal ingredient wasn't simply grown but formed. Every winter, a type of ginseng called snow ginseng would grow on the snowy mountains. This type of ginseng was buried deep in the snow and was extremely small. The largest of them was only as big as a child's pinky finger. In the spring of the next year, a group of beautiful butterflies would fly to the snowy mountains. Each of them was as big as a palm, and their bodies were like white jade. They were clean and flawless, so they were called jade butterflies. The jade butterfly laid eggs in the snow, and after the baby jade butterfly was born, it would burrow into the snow to find the roots of the snow ginseng and eat it. When the baby jade butterfly ate the snow ginseng, most of them would freeze to death in the snow. As a result, the corpses of the snow ginseng and the baby jade butterfly would grow together. In the early winter of the next year, they would grow into a snow jade cordyceps that was both a plant and an animal. How did the jade butterfly cub and the snow ginseng grow together? No one knew the reason behind this. However, it took the Mu family and Junecia 3 years to figure out where the snow jade cordyceps came from. Junecia died, and the Mu family was defeated. This secret fell into the hands of Mu Ling. In order to obtain more snow jade cordyceps, Junecia and the Mu family cultivated the snowy mountain herb field. In the winter, they artificially planted large amounts of snow ginseng for the jade butterflies to lay eggs. They even began to research how to attract more jade butterflies to the herb field, as well as how to raise them. However, before they could even try, the cooperation was broken. Mu Ling also wanted to see what the jade butterflies looked like. It would be best if she could catch a few and raise them. Thus, with Dabai's protection, she resolutely decided to take the risk and climb the snowy mountain. The jade butterflies would only appear for a few days in the early spring. At that time, the snow would melt, so it was impossible to climb the mountain. Thus, if she wanted to see the jade butterflies, she could only spend the winter on the snowy mountain and wait until spring. In fact, Mu Ling was not impulsive. After all, the Mu family and Junecia had cooperated before. She also understood the situation on the snowy mountain herb field. Not only did she bring Dabai, but she also brought a lot of food and daily necessities. The tall Dabai seemed to have become her horse. Not only did he have to carry her, but he also had to help her carry a lot of things. Mu Ling brought a lot of food, a large bedding, several sets of clothes, boots, and even cooking pots and pans. One could imagine how much work Dabai had to do. However, Dabai was very willing. He was especially happy along the way. When they encountered some small beasts, he also turned a blind eye and let them go. There were several abandoned stone houses beside the herb field. Mu Ling found the warmest one and tidied it up. Then she and Dabai stayed there. Mu Ling stayed for a night before she realized that she had forgotten to bring charcoal. She was so cold that she almost fell sick. Fortunately, she had the habit of carrying medicinal pills with her. She was fine after taking a few pills. She looked around and actually found a large pile of charcoal and firewood in the most remote stone house. There were also many daily necessities. These were probably left behind by the previous herb farmers. The charcoal was used for warmth, and the firewood was used for cooking. Just like that, Mu Ling stayed in the snow mountain herb field. After a few days of acclimatization, she dug up a few snow ginseng to study. She even dug up a snow jade cordyceps that hadn't been picked yet. Mu Ling was overjoyed. She yelled in the snow, "Dabai! Dabai, come and see!" Dabai lay beside her. He looked lazy and adorable, but in reality, he maintained a high level of vigilance. He knew that there were many wolves, tigers, and leopards on this snow mountain. He originally wanted to follow Miss Ling and find out where she went before telling his master. However, who knew that Miss Ling would treat him as a horse and bring him up the snow mountain. Miss Ling was the girl that his master risked his life to save. His master must like her very, very much. Thus, he had to protect Miss Ling no matter what. Dabai hurriedly stood up and shook off the snow on his body. He ran over excitedly. Mu Ling placed the small snow jade cordyceps in her palm for him to see. "Look, I found a treasure. This is good stuff." Dabai didn't know what Miss Ling was doing here, nor did he know how precious this small cordyceps was. However, he knew that Miss Ling was very happy. He rubbed his nose against Mu Ling's hand in response. "Here you go. Thank you for your hard work," Mu Ling said earnestly. Dabai glanced at the cordyceps. He didn't seem to be very interested. Mu Ling brought the cordyceps to his mouth. Only then did he use his tongue to roll the small cordyceps into his mouth. He swallowed it without even chewing. After Junecia's partnership with the Mu family was terminated, the cordyceps that were cultivated and wild were all gone. This was because no medicine farmers dared to go up the snow mountain again. If Mu Ling were to buy these cordyceps on the black market, they would definitely be sold for an extremely high price. Even if she didn't buy them, she could still eat them herself. However, she rewarded Dabai just like that, and the silly Dabai simply ate them. When she started, Dabai was also happy. It had nothing to do with value or utility. It was just that simple and pure. There was no need to explain it to outsiders. A few days later, it began to snow heavily. Mu Ling, and Dabai hid in the stone house and didn't go out. Mu Ling knew that Dabai was a carnivore, so she specially prepared some cured meat. She clamped a metal rack over the stove and hung the cured meat on top of it to roast. After a while, the cured meat sizzled with oil and exuded an extremely alluring aroma. Dabai wanted nothing more than to pounce on the cured meat and gobble it up. However, he resisted the urge and patiently waited for Miss Ling to finish roasting the cured meat. Mu Ling asked as she roasted the cured meat, "Does that baddie roast meat for you often?" Dabai's mind was completely focused on the cured meat. He didn't understand what she was saying, so he just nodded. "That baddie also likes to eat meat, right?" Mu Ling asked again. Dabai continued to nod. "That baddie is really baddie. I curse him to stuff a piece of meat between his teeth every time he eats." Mu Ling started to mutter to herself. No, I curse him to grow cavities in his teeth and become a vegetarian for the rest of his life." Dabai nodded vigorously. His soul was completely captivated by the aroma of the cured meat. Finally, Dabai couldn't take it anymore and allowed Mu Ling to continue talking. He drooled as he got up and lay down on the stove. Just as Dabai was about to eat all the cured meat in one bite, he suddenly stopped. His eyes, which had been infatuated, immediately turned cold and fierce. He sensed movement outside the house. He immediately jumped down and ran to the door, indicating to Mu Ling that there was danger outside. Mu Ling was alarmed. Something that could cause Dabai to be so vigilant had to be quite dangerous. Along the way to the snowy mountains, many wild beasts would voluntarily make way for Dabai. Normally, it wouldn't be wild beasts that came looking for them. Could it be that someone had come looking for them? Mu Ling was puzzled. She really couldn't think of anyone who would come here. She cautiously lifted the curtain and looked outside. It would have been better if she didn't look, but she was immediately given a fright. Heavens! There was a large pack of snow leopards outside. There were at least 50 of them, and all of them were extremely ferocious. They were all staring at her stone house. What shocked her the most was that there was a woman standing in the pack of snow leopards. Her facial features were well defined, and she was extremely beautiful. Moreover, this woman was dressed like a hunter. Her legs were as wide as her shoulders, and she stood with her arms crossed in front of her chest. She looked extremely domineering. Mu Ling took a closer look, and even discovered that there was a dagger at her waist. She had clearly brought the pack of snow leopards here. They were all well trained, and there were 50 of them standing in a very neat formation. "Who is she?" Mu Ling muttered to herself. She looked toward Dabai and saw that he had already opened his mouth wide, revealing his fangs. Mu Ling couldn't help but ponder a question. If this woman had ill intentions, would Dabai be able to defeat those 50 snow leopards? It had to be said that Mu Ling was a little worried. She thought that even if Dabai could defeat those snow leopards, it would definitely be very difficult. Otherwise, Dabai wouldn't have revealed such an expression. What should she do? Just as Mu Ling was feeling anxious, the woman outside the door shouted, "Hey, listen up, this herb field belongs to me. If you don't want to die, then come out and apologize to me. I'm a great person who won't hold a grudge against you, and I'll spare your life." Mu Ling was initially still worried, but upon hearing this her anger flared up. She opened the door and walked out with Dabai. Dabai's aura clearly intimidated the 50 snow leopards, and they all retreated. The woman was very surprised, but she quickly regained her composure. She said coldly, "You're just a tiger. How dare you show off in front of me? You're asking for death." Mu Ling was completely baffled. Who on earth came to show off in front of them? Mu Ling was just about to retort when the woman suddenly blew a sharp whistle. Not long after, a large pack of wolves ran out from the forest around the herb field. There were about 100 of them, and they all surrounded them. Mu Ling was dumbstruck. "Dabai, she's trying to cause trouble." Chapter 1290. Due to the addition of the wild wolves, the 50 snow leopards' morale was greatly boosted. and they once again surrounded Ling and Dabai. The wild wolves also quickly closed in on them. Over 150 ferocious beasts formed a large circle, trapping Ling and Dabai in the center. Dabai continued to circle around Ling, not daring to stray too far from her. It stared at the surrounding ferocious beasts and let out a low growl, as if it was warning them. However, the snow leopards and wild wolves were no longer afraid of Dabai, because they had many companions. The snow leopard standing at the very front also let out low growls in return. Howl! Dabai suddenly let out a loud roar, and only then did the snow leopards become fearful and retreat a few steps. However, they didn't retreat too far, and they continued to stare at Ling and Dabai as if they were prey. Ling was well aware of this situation, and she pulled out the dagger she always carried with her. Dabai, don't worry about me, she said in a low voice. If Dabai could understand Linger's words, he would definitely scold her for being stupid just like his master. If it weren't for the fact that he had to protect Ling, Dabai wouldn't be afraid no matter how many ferocious beasts there were. However, with Linger around, his chances of victory were extremely slim. This was because there were too many ferocious beasts, and if he let his guard down, Linger would be bitten to death. This was also the reason why Dabai was still circling around Linger and hadn't launched an attack yet. He couldn't leave Linger by even half a step, and he couldn't allow the snow leopards and wild wolves to take advantage of him. Looks like you don't plan on apologizing to me, the woman shouted arrogantly. Linger shouted back, why should I? Who said that this herb field belongs to you? The woman swept her gaze across the mountain of wild wolves and snow leopards, and she laughed loudly. If they say it's mine, then it's mine. Why are you being so unreasonable? These medicinal fields were clearly cultivated by my Mu family. Linger retorted angrily. Although Linger was stupid, she was not naive. She was dealing with this woman. Firstly, she wanted to stall for time. Secondly, she wanted to probe this woman's background. Thirdly, she wanted to find a way to reconcile. After all, she couldn't possibly drag Dabai down with her. Mu clan? Haha, never heard of it. Stinky girl, let me tell you, these things were all stolen. Whoever's fist is harder, the item will belong to them. The woman said arrogantly. Linger blurted out without thinking. Okay, then let's fight. Whoever loses gets the hell out of here. You want to fight me? The woman laughed loudly. What? You don't dare? As Linger provoked her, she secretly thought about what kind of rules she should set to trick this woman. After all, she had been tricked by her sister a few times, so she was experienced. However, who would have thought that the woman would leap lightly onto a large rock and leave behind a threat? Okay, you'll be responsible for your own life and death. Based on this woman's skills, she could probably leave her in the dust. Linger was a little confused, but she quickly asked, how do we fight? Based on our own abilities, the woman said as she pulled out a dagger. A sly look flashed across Linger's eyes as she continued. You'll be responsible for your own life and death. Your beast is not allowed to seek revenge. You're dead meat, the woman said coldly. Life and death are one thing, rules are another. Let's talk about the rules first, shall we? Linger said seriously. Don't worry, if I really lose to you, I guarantee that they will all retreat. Haha, if you die by my hands, even if that tiger of yours doesn't seek revenge, I will find trouble with it. The woman's tone was extremely arrogant. Linger sucked in a breath of cold air, her anger finally burning. She didn't waste any more words as she pulled out a dagger and pointed it at the woman. Come. Seeing this, the big white tiger growled at Linger touched the big white tiger's mouth and whispered, It's fine, don't worry. The woman walked over step by step, and the surrounding snow wolves and wild wolves consciously retreated to the side. Both Linger and the woman were holding daggers. Although Linger only knew a little bit of martial arts, she wasn't afraid. This was because this competition was based on each person's abilities, and there were no restrictions. Therefore, she didn't want to fight this woman at all. Soon the two stood face to face, only a step away from each other. Looking at her from such a close distance, Linger was even more stunned. This woman was really beautiful. Begin. The woman suddenly shouted and stabbed her dagger. Mu Linger retreated and casually scattered a large amount of powder at the same time. The woman didn't expect this and hurriedly wiped the powder off her face. What is this? Mu Linger stared blankly at her without a word. What else could this powder be but poison? Her big sister was the most poisonous woman in Cloud Realm continent. So how could she not have some skills as her little sister? After leaving Tiger's prison in the past, she and her big sister had brought plenty of poisons with them. The woman wiped her face clean and was about to attack again when her face and hands began to itch unbearably. She had no choice but to toss her dagger aside and scratch herself instead. You poisoned me. Slut, you're despicable. The woman cursed. We've already agreed that we'll rely on our own abilities. Mu Linger retorted immediately. You. The woman clearly didn't expect Mu Linger to have poisons. She quibbled. When this young lady said we'll rely on our own abilities, I meant martial arts, not these kinds of despicable methods. Your martial arts are clearly better than mine. So don't you think you're despicable? You clearly have more beasts than me. So don't you think you're despicable? Mu Linger retorted angrily. You. The woman was easily irritated. Give me the antidote, or else I'll have them bite you to death. If you lose, you have to apologize to me first, Mu Linger said seriously. Don't even think about it. The woman roared back. Are you going to act shamelessly? If you can't afford to lose, then don't play. Mu Linger was even more incensed now. But the woman was actually shameless enough to shout back. So what if this young lady acts shamelessly? Give me the antidote right now and apologize, then scram. Otherwise, I'll make sure your corpse doesn't even exist. Mu Linger was so angry that she felt unwell. She didn't know how to reason with the woman, so she simply shouted back. No, not giving, not giving, not giving. The woman suddenly swiped at her with her claws. Mu Linger tried to dodge as she tried to use her poison. However, the woman's movements were too quick. Her other hand grabbed onto Mu Linger's hand, and she yanked violently, almost dislocating Mu Linger's wrist. Mu Linger was in great pain and couldn't dodge in time. The woman's other hand viciously clawed at Mu Linger's face, leaving behind 2 scars. Mu Linger was dumbfounded. Right at this moment, Dabai suddenly pounced at her at lightning speed. He was so fast that not only was the woman unable to react in time, but the surrounding beasts were also caught off guard. Dabai directly pushed the woman to the ground. He pressed one paw against her body and raised his other paw high up in the air. Just as he was about to swipe at her face, the surrounding beasts all pounced toward Mu Linger. Leopards were far faster than all other beasts. Dabai retreated without hesitation and quickly lifted Mu Linger into the air. The 2 leopards missed their target. Dabai was filled with killing intent. He wanted to bite the 2 leopards to death, but he suppressed his urge. He flew up and caught Mu Linger, allowing Mu Linger to land on his back. Then he landed on the ground. The woman had already crawled up. Her face was pale from fright. She scratched her face as she pointed at Dabai and Mu Linger. All of you attack. Tear them apart, she roared. In an instant, over 150 beasts swarmed toward them. Dabai and Mu Linger were instantly drowned out by the sea of beasts. The leopards were extremely fast, while the wolves were extremely organized. What was even more frightening was that the woman was still giving out orders. She was speaking a strange language. Mu Linger couldn't understand a word she was saying, but Dabai understood everything. Mu Linger was extremely shocked. Could it be that this woman was also from the Black Tribe? Could it be that she also understood the language of beasts? Dabai was also puzzled. Was this woman from the same tribe as Master? However, he had no time to think about this. He had to protect Miss Linger. The 50 leopards all pounced at the white tiger's back, aiming for Mu Linger. Meanwhile, the 100 or so wolves split into 4 groups to target the white tiger's 4 legs. The white tiger was truly fighting 1 against 100. No matter how ferocious Dabai was, he was still outnumbered. He would be drowned by these beasts. Dabai carried Mu Linger on his back. Dabai dodged the attacks of the snow leopards and wolves at lightning speed. At the same time, he pounced on the snow leopards that were attacking Mu Linger. However, all the wolves that managed to bite Dabai died on the spot. This was because Dabai was the leader of the poison corpses that Juni Xie had raised. His entire body was filled with poison. Even his blood was extremely poisonous. The snow leopard's target was Mu Linger. They pounced toward her from all directions. Mu Linger was scared out of her wits. However, at this moment she was brave. She gripped her dagger tightly and guarded against the snow leopards that could pounce at any moment. Suddenly, 3 snow leopards pounced toward her from the right. Dabai immediately dodged and pounced toward the 3 snow leopards. At the same time, another 5 snow leopards pounced toward Mu Linger. Dabai leaped high into the air and dodged. However, the snow leopards stepped on the wolves and leaped into the air. They pounced toward Mu Linger from above. Mu Linger was so scared that tears flowed out of her eyes. She clenched her teeth tightly and held the dagger with both hands, stabbing it into the air. Dabai couldn't care less about the wolves that were attacking him. After he landed, he immediately pounced to the side. Almost at the same time, the snow leopards pounced on the ground. Attack together! The woman roared from the side. Her face was already red from her scratches, but she didn't care anymore. In an instant, the group of wolves formed a circle. The snow leopards also formed a circle. Under the woman's command, the circle of snow leopards attacked at the same time. They all stepped on the backs of the wolves and leaped into the air before pouncing down. Dozens of snow leopards pounced down, leaving Dabai and Mu Linger with nowhere to run. Dabai had just dodged one snow leopard when another one pounced on him. He hurriedly dodged the other snow leopard, but the other snow leopard pounced on him again. A few snow leopards scratched the back of Dabai, leaving bloody marks. They were so close to catching Mu Linger. Although many snow leopards were poisoned to death, there were too many of them. In addition, the wolves had also started to imitate the snow leopards. This forced Dabai, who was riddled with injuries, to have no way to escape. Mu Linger's position behind Dabai was getting smaller and smaller. Once she came into contact with Dabai's blood, she would also be poisoned to death. Just as 5 to 6 snow leopards pounced on him at the same time, Dabai suddenly flipped over and threw Mu Linger onto the ground. At the same time, he pounced over and covered Mu Linger in his arms, protecting her tightly. Chapter 1291. As soon as the white tiger wrapped Mu Linger in its arms, all the other beasts stopped attacking and waited for their master's orders. The white tiger's legs and buttocks were covered in claw wounds. Fresh blood had dyed its noble white fur red. It swept its eyes over the rest of the beasts before glaring murderously at the woman standing in the distance. If not for the fact that it had to protect Miss Linger, it would have pounced on her and torn her to shreds. It raised its head and roared a few times at the sky, hoping to summon the other tigers from the forest. Unfortunately, tigers didn't climb the mountains, so it couldn't summon any of its companions. The woman stared at the white tiger from a distance and had long sensed that it was different from the others. She was planning to deal with that damned girl first before figuring out this red-eyed white tiger. Unexpectedly, she discovered that the white tiger's fangs, claws, and blood were all laced with lethal poison. This was a venomous tiger. She had grown up in the mysterious continent's Black Forest, where all the beasts gathered. She had never seen such a venomous tiger before. Could it be that this tiger was unique to Cloud Realm continent? Awah! Awah! The white tiger howled nonstop at the woman. What are you howling for? I'm telling you now. Even if you don't want the antidote, this young lady will take your lives. The woman suddenly shouted in beast language. In a flash, all the snow leopards and wolves crouched on the ground, ready to attack. Big White understood the woman's orders. She wanted the rest of the beasts to attack and tear it to shreds. Mu Linger hid in Big White's arms and had no idea what the woman had ordered, but she could clearly feel Big White's rage. Just what happened? Suddenly, a snow leopard pounced forward like an arrow. In a flash, all the other snow leopards were out, followed by the pack of wolves. All of them pounced on Big White, scratching and biting it viciously. Although Big White would die from the poison in 1 or 2 bites, they still pounced on it one after the other. With over 100 beasts attacking it, how many wounds would Big White have on its body? How much blood would it lose? Dabai will die. Dabai had no way to retaliate. However, He still held his head up high like a king looking down on all the other beasts. He still protected Mulinger well. In fact, he was afraid that Mulinger would be worried. His body didn't even tremble when his medicine was taken away. Mulinger smelled the thick scent of blood and heard the howls of many wild beasts nearby. She suddenly realized that Dabai was using his own body to protect her. No! Mulinger shouted. Don't hurt it anymore. I admit defeat. I'll give you the antidote. I'll apologize to you. She shouted with all her might. Let it go. You can do whatever you want. All of you stop. I'm begging you stop. When the woman heard that, she was overjoyed. Compared to a dead tiger, she preferred a live one. This was the first time she had seen such a venomous tiger. No matter what, she had to bring it back to the Black Forest and show it off. She waved her hand, and all the wild beasts stopped and retreated. A child's intuition was very accurate, and the intuition of animals was also very accurate. Dabai knew that this woman wasn't a good person as soon as he saw her. Even though all the other beasts had stopped attacking, he still protected Mulinger. Mulinger struggled a few times, but Dabai didn't budge. Mulinger obviously knew that this woman wasn't trustworthy and was unreasonable. Even if she apologized, she might not be able to leave safely. However, the situation had already escalated to this point. What else could she do? She could only do her best to protect Dabai and her own life. This trip to the snowy mountains made Mulinger understand one thing even more. Beasts were easy to guard against, but humans were hard to guard against. Mulinger stroked Dabai and said in a low voice, If this continues, we'll all die. Dabai, be good and move aside. Perhaps Dabai understood Mulinger's words, or perhaps he was comforted by her. But he carefully got up. As if he was afraid that the poisonous blood would hurt Mulinger, he abruptly rolled to the side and let the wounds on his body rub against the snowy ground. He couldn't help but grin and reveal his fangs in pain. Seeing Dabai's torn and bloody body, Mulinger's heart throbbed with pain, and tears immediately fell from her eyes. She pounced over to hug Dabai, but Dabai hurriedly got up in fright and hid far away, looking at her in horror. Mulinger was stunned. Dabai's large, red eyes immediately revealed a look of grievance and distress. He looked at Mulinger and whimpered, as if he was apologizing and crying at the same time. He didn't avoid her on purpose, but he couldn't hug her. Only then did Mulinger come to her senses. She pursed her lips and tried to hold it in, but she couldn't hold it in and started sobbing. Dabai. Seeing Mulinger cry, the woman's smile became even more radiant. Haha, you're crying from this. You're still wet behind the ears. How dare you fight with me? Where's the antidote? Hurry up and give it to me. It could only be said that the poisons Mulinger asked for weren't vicious enough, and the woman she met was quite patient. The itch had already spread to her neck, but she was still able to remain calm. Mulinger tossed the antidote over. The woman said coldly, Stupid girl. You better not play any tricks. Even if I die here, my beast's weapon will be buried with you. Mulinger couldn't be bothered to reply. After the woman took the antidote, the itch disappeared immediately. She was extremely happy. Hee, excellent, excellent. Let's play slowly from now on, shall we? You just want the snow jade cordyceps. I'm a pharmacist. I can help you grow more snow jade cordyceps, Mulinger said coldly. This was the best bargaining chip that she had come up with in a hurry. Hearing this, the woman was even happier. She laughed loudly. I see. All right, I can let you live, but you still have to apologize to me and say that the herb field belongs to me. Mulinger clenched her fists. She was so angry that her lungs were about to explode. She would rather give up her life than bow down to this woman. However, she couldn't bear to part with Dabai. She still bowed down in the end. She lowered her head and muttered, I'm sorry, the herb field is yours. The woman looked on with interest and was still dissatisfied. What did you say? Come over and say it louder. You have to apologize properly. Didn't your parents teach you? Mulinger lowered her head and walked over. She said mildly, I'm sorry, the herb field is yours. However, the woman suddenly grabbed her by the hair and forced her to look up. What's with that attitude? Look at me and say it. How? Dabai roared. It didn't have its usual aura. It was clearly angry, but it sounded like it was crying. Mu Linger hurriedly waved her hands at Dabai, telling him not to move. The woman glanced at Dabai and snorted disdainfully. So what if you can rear a tiger? You're still defeated by me, aren't you? Heh, repeat what you just said. I'm sorry, the herb field is yours, Mu Linger said loudly. She comforted herself. This wasn't humiliation, she was saving Dabai. The woman tightened her grip and almost tore off Mu Linger's hair. She said, I said that you poisoned me. That's despicable. I poisoned you. That's despicable, Mu Linger yelled. The woman was finally satisfied. I thought you had some backbone. Turns out you're just a coward. What a bitch. Mu Linger's eyes reddened, but she didn't try to defend herself. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she stubbornly refused to let them fall. Unexpectedly, the woman went even further. How about this? Say that you're a bitch, and I'll forgive you. Mu Linger immediately glared at her. The woman didn't seem to care. You don't have to say it. I'm not forcing you. Mu Linger stared at the woman. She bit her lips so hard that it was about to bleed. It looks like you don't want to be forgiven. Fine, I won't forgive you. The woman waved her hand, and the surrounding ferocious beasts closed in again. I'll talk. Mu Linger choked up. I'm. The woman waited patiently. Who knew that just as Mu Linger was about to continue speaking, the big white tiger suddenly howled. The surrounding ferocious beasts seemed to have sensed something, and they all looked around in fear. The woman quickly noticed the strange behavior of the group of beasts. She also looked around. As she looked, she suddenly heard a tiger roar from behind her. This tiger roar didn't sound like it was made by a tiger. It sounded more like a human's beast language. The moment this tiger roar sounded, all the wild beasts in the area prostrated themselves, as if they had been tamed in an instant. The woman was shocked. She turned around and saw 10 big white tigers in a row. They were walking towards her, and on the back of the biggest white tiger in the middle sat a man. His figure was thin, and he was dressed in black. He gave off a cold aura that was even colder than the air on the snowy mountain. Was he the one who let out that tiger roar just now? The woman didn't understand what that tiger roar meant, but she was very sure that it was beast language. That was the most honorable and authoritative voice in the language of beast taming. In the black forest of the mysterious continent, only this voice could control tigers and all the other beasts. Could it be that this person was? The woman was stunned. She didn't dare to think further. She told herself that he couldn't be. Mu Linger was still being pulled by her hair. She glanced over and saw that familiar figure from the corner of her eye. It was just a glance, but the tears in her eyes slowly fell. This annoying person could actually find his way here? He could actually. She hated him so much. She didn't want to see him. How? How could there be a time when she didn't hate him, just like now? Was this a dream? Jinzi looked from afar, his gaze fixed on Mu Linger's hair being pulled. He didn't say anything, but the white tigers could clearly sense his rage. They all sped up, and the wild beasts seemed to have sensed it too. They all trembled. Seeing this, the woman was even more shocked. She suddenly pulled Mu Linger closer and grabbed Mu Linger's neck. She warned, "Don't come over or I'll kill her." Jinzi jumped down from the tiger's back. His gaze slowly moved to Mu Linger's face. He clearly saw the scratches on her face and her teary eyes. He looked at the woman expressionlessly. His voice was so cold that it could kill. He said word by word, "You made her cry." You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.